3 counties, 24 cities, working together, accomplishing more than any of us could alone. Whether your roots run generations deep, or you recently moved to Greater Portland, you are a part of Metro, the nation's only regional government elected by the people. Planning for the future, preserving what we love. Let's keep our region thriving for decades to come.
I'm Laura Lepley, a Metro Park Ranger. Here at Oxbow Park, safety is our #1 priority, not only for our guests, but for our staff members. I'm at the Welcome Center and you're at the Regional Center. The council chambers are located on the 3rd floor. In the event of a fire or fire alarm, please exit through the door in the northeast corner of the room. Go down the stairway to the 2nd floor, exit through the main entrance by the reception desk and gather in the courtyard outside that entrance. In the event of a medical or fire emergency, please call 911 and notify the security agent at the reception desk. The nearest defibrillator is mounted on the steps leading from the reception desk down to Grand Avenue. Thank you, and come visit us at Oxbow Park.
Councilor Nolan is present.
Sorry, didn't hear you.
That was my apologies. And Councilor Simpson is excused, and Acting Council President Wong.
Present. Thank you. Okay, today's work session is a meeting of the Budget Committee. I will now convene a meeting of the Budget Committee. The Budget Committee met on April 9th for a presentation and budget hearing for the proposed FY 26-27 budget and budget message. We received no testimony at that time. The Budget Committee reconvened on April 14th and April 21st to review departmental budgets. Today, we'll hear more presentations for the remaining departmental budgets. Following the departmental budget presentations, there will be additional time for discussion and deliberation. So we'll get started with our presentations. We have planning, development, and research. So for our first presentation today, please welcome Catherine Shallow, our director, Louis Wilkinson, deputy director, Ted Liebold, transportation policy director, and David Stein, the finance manager. Welcome.
Thank you, Acting Council President Wong. Thank you, members of council. We really appreciate your taking the time to hear from us on the Planning, Development, and Research Department budget. Today, I'm Catherine Chiarlo. I'm the director of the department. I use she, her pronouns. As you all know, next slide, please. Little visual on this. PD&R encompasses a wide range of activities. We distribute federal transportation planning funding in a way that meets regional needs and council priorities. Under state law and rules, we manage the region's urban growth boundary and support regional planning for growth management. We deliver a range of community investment grant programs with a strong equity focus, and we develop data and analytics to support this work across Metro and for partners around the region. We do all of this in service to Metro's goal of ensuring that every person and every community in the region can thrive. I'm happy to be here today to share information about the budget that actually makes this work possible. If we had a theme for our budget this year, it would be meeting the moment. And meeting the moment presents both opportunity and challenge. Among the challenges, federal funding instability, constrained local financial resources, and a housing and economic climate that prevents many people from thriving in our region. On the opportunity side, we're excited about some new programs to help Metro meet these challenges and about finding ways to leverage resources to do that. Next slide, please. This is our agenda for the day. We'll start by sharing a report on last year's, or still this fiscal year, and what some of the council budget modifications enabled to happen. Then we will do a brief dive into our budget performance measures and then shift focus to the FY27 budget and give you a chance to hear from us and then talk with us about the proposed modifications. With me today to help cover these topics, we have David Stein, the PD&R Finance Manager, Lou Wilkinson, our Deputy Director, and Ted Liebold, our Transportation Policy Director. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to take a minute to, as I noted before, walk through the investments that you all made last year and some of the things that have resulted from those modifications. I want to start by thanking you for the approval of those resources in a tough year. They supported critical work. They helped advance priority programs that I know you all care about. And then I guess I will give a caveat. This is not meant to be a comprehensive list of accomplishments of everything our department did last year by any stretch. But here's a few highlights of the work that the resources approved in the budget made possible. The Future Vision Project, which you're all aware of, work is underway to develop a recommendation that will come back to you around this time next year. That will be an update to the charter required 50-year future vision. And this year we chartered the Future Vision Commission to make that recommendation. We've sought out diverse voices to inform the work, including the commission itself and also a youth committee. We also have a number of contracts with community-based nonprofits to support engagement. We, as I mentioned, have a Future Vision Youth Committee. They have started meeting. It's really exciting to see this, the way the young people in our region are engaging with this question or these set of questions. And we kicked off an artist residency program, which piloted work to integrate arts and creativity into the future vision for sure, but also into this type of major planning project as a way that Metro can expand the way we think about and do planning. Last year's budget also supported transportation investment in critical transit improvements. Just high level, that included $88 million in regional flexible fund allocation or REFA funding for projects including 82nd Avenue, TV Highway, Montgomery Park Streetcar, the Sunrise Corridor Project, and Burnside Bridge. So a real mix of projects that advance transit and try to improve access and equity in the region. We invested $40 million into region-wide programs such as transit-oriented development and safe routes to schools. And we directed nearly $50 million into community-scale projects, transportation projects across the region. So you start to see the theme of investment in community. Also new this year was the Community Transportation Academy. This partnership with PSU, ODOT, and TriMet helps community members and PSU students develop transportation expertise and leadership skills. Again, a way that we can try to bring people closer into the transportation planning project process, which you all know is long and can often be complicated. We use an equity lens to identify topics and speakers, and the application criteria encourage a broad range of participation from around the region. Two last things from last year. In partnership with the Housing Department, we completed the Regional Housing Coordination Strategy. That strategy was adopted by Council and sets the stage for Metro and our partners to respond to the housing crisis and do so with concrete actions and a strong emphasis on affordability. I know that at last week's budget workshop, a number of questions came up about that and specifically about land banking, and we'll happily address some of those questions a little bit later in our presentation today. And then finally, our department did accommodate a budget cut last year. We cut a position that would have provided a program director for our data resource center. We redirected management resources to fill the gap made by that cut, and the team has continued to provide support for departmental programs and beyond, including expanding the Regional Land Information System, or RLIS, to share housing data and cooling corridors analysis, and improving the accessibility of web tools like the Metro Map, the RID Reporter, and the Councilor Lookup tool. Next slide, please.
Good morning, Council. I'm Ted Liebold, the Transportation Policy Director. I use he, him pronouns. And before we dive into the actual budget numbers, I will walk you through the department's budget performance measures as shown in the 3 graphics on this slide. The breadth of planning, development, and research's work doesn't lend itself easily to a few specific measures, but we have worked with the performance team to identify measures that can be meaningfully be reported on an annual basis and are relevant to budget decisions. The first graphic on the left-hand side of the slide shows local compliance with land use and transportation functional plans. As you all know, our department works closely with partners and with you as council to create transportation and land use plans at a regional scale. However, much of the work to bring these plans to life is actually done by our local partners. The urban growth management and regional transportation functional plans give direction to cities and counties on how to comply with regional transportation and land use goals and requirements within their own land use and transportation plans. We track compliance with the functional plan by our local partners on an annual basis. After reviewing the performance, we look for underlying causes of non-compliance and to see whether technical or resource support could help address any local compliance issues and implementation of the regional plans. As you can see, local agencies' compliance has been strong and improving, though some agencies are still working to comply with planning requirements in the new urban growth boundary areas. The second graphic in the middle of the slide shows the transit-oriented development housing funds and their investment in equity focus areas. As you also know, PD&R delivers a range of grant programs. Metro councilors engage in those programs in many ways. This measure tracks one of our largest grant programs, the Transit-Oriented Development Program, which funds affordable housing near transit. The budget performance measure helps us track how the program distributes funding to projects within and outside of equity focus area. This metric provides insight into where funds are being invested relative to our lower income communities across the region. As you can see, most of the TOD funding continues to be invested in projects located in equity focus areas. The last graphic on the right-hand side of the slide shows our Data Resource Center web service demand. One of PD&R's core functions is to maintain and provide data to inform planning, policy, and development across the region. The Data Resource Center works to ensure not only the quality of that data, but also its usefulness and availability to inform understanding of trends and resources in our region. We track requests to the Resource Center web server to access and use this information. And you can see the trend of increasing requests, which in turn indicates the growing accessibility and usefulness of our data. Next slide, please.
Can you
Yep.
explain what the dollar numbers mean on the web?
Sorry, can you go back to the previous slide? Sorry.
Like what is that 360?
Oh, no, those are million requests. Those aren't dollar. You're talking about the data resource web service command? Yeah, those are not dollar figure. Those are actual requests for our data.
What is the measurement or like the unit?
It's whenever there is a request to our web server from the internet to extract some sort of data from our system, it gets tracked, and that's the number of requests.
So it's 360 requests?
Million.
We get 360 million requests.
360 is an estimate for this year. The last actual data net point is 276 million. And I can I can have
Scraping.
It's-
It's computer scraping.
in some, I can actually have people from our data resource center come up and explain more detail.
So is this like like a memory storage unit of requests? Is that what we're having?
If we're going to go into this level of detail, I think that we should have Cindy or Madeline come up and just give us a quick,
Sorry.
it's a pretty technical question, and I just want to make sure we get the right information in your hands pretty quickly. Thank you, Ted.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Acting Council President Huang. It represents not just data requests from the ARLIS API, which is a programming interface, so other people's software like Portland Maps or something like that can get ARLIS data, like information about a tax lot. It's also every time someone clicks on a map or accesses an aerial photo, or they script against our address or locator service. So City of Portland actually has scripts that run for their taxing process, run regularly and bump up these numbers. But it's a variety of services, some of them automated, some of them not. And it's all through our web server, and it's in the millions and growing.
So this is like 360 million interactions with our data.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Thank you so much. And will you introduce yourself for the record?
My
Thank you.
apologies. My name is Madeline Steele. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a manager in the Data Resource Center.
Thank you for the question and for allowing us to bring up
Oh,
Madeline.
that's great. Thank you.
Okay, now we can go to the next slide.
Okay. Thank you, Council, for the question and the interest. Now we're going to shift gears and start talking about FY '27. As we look forward to this year's budget, you'll see the following described in the coming slides. You'll see new programs that respond to current conditions in the region. You'll see a conservative approach to staffing. You'll see a commitment to leveraging Metro's general fund resources. So in this particular slide, we have an overview of our department's funding sources and expenditures by program. I'm going to start by looking at the circle on the left, which is where the money comes from. As you can see, just under half our department's revenues are federal funding, which are the two slices on the left, the two gray slices. That comprises about 46% of our department's funding. The majority of that, in turn, is federal funding, which is called formula funding, which comes to us by statute as the region's metropolitan planning organization. We talked a little bit before about some of the ways that's spent. We'll talk a little bit more about it here, but essentially what that funding covers is our transportation planning activities, our allocations to our partners, and separately, we have some formula funding in there that supports our transit-oriented development or TOD program. On the right side of the left circle, you can also see the non-federal funded sources. So you can see the blue slice, which shows Metro General Fund, which is about 1/5 of our budget. And you can see other non-federal funds that come from a variety of sources, including construction excise tax or CET funds, which we'll talk about more later today. These come from a small surcharge on new construction. And then other sources in that bottom right slice can include transfers from other Metro departments or local governments to cover the data and resource and research services that Madeline described. Also, we have some non-federal grants and contracts. And the last thing I'll say is that little gray slice on the top, our competitive federal funds make up about 4% of the department's budgets. Obviously, those we need to apply for and are competitively either awarded or not awarded. The chart on the right is where the money goes by major program area. David's going to talk quite a bit more about this, but I just want to summarize just to give you a sense of what the overall picture looks like. That large blue slice shows our transportation planning and projects, which includes the MPO work and grants we give to partner organizations via the Regional Travel Options or RTO program. That yellow slice is community investments and development, which is mostly made up of grants to external partners via our TOD program and other grant programs like the 2040 grant program and the community placemaking grants. This year, that yellow slice also includes a couple of new things: the Housing Production Accelerator Fund and the Job Ready Lands Program, both of which Malou will talk about a little bit more later and we'll be happy to answer any questions about. And then finally, not quite finally, the pink slice on the bottom shows our land use expenditures. Those are charter required and state required activities. They include urban growth management and creation of the future vision. And then that last slice is the green slice at the top, showing data and research activities. And we put that on top because it really is cross-cutting to the department and also to other Metro departments and partners. Now I'm going to turn it over to David, who's going to walk through the FY27 budget numbers themselves in a little more detail.
Thank you. David Stein, Finance Manager for the department. We can go to the next slide. Oh, there we go. So before we dive deeper into the FY27 budget, I just wanted to take a moment to compare that year's budget to prior years. On the left, you can see the relative share of our different funding sources over time, essentially taking that pie chart from the previous slide, which is shown here as the third bar from the left, and comparing it to the FY26 amended budget and FY25 actuals. You'll see that overall, the relative makeup of our funding sources has remained very consistent. The two blocks at the bottom are federal funds, with formula funds making up the larger, lighter gray block, and competitive grants making up the smaller, darker gray block. Combined, federal funds consistently make up about 50% of our overall funding. The top two blocks are non-federal funds, general fund in blue, making up between 1/5 and 1/4 of our overall funding, other non-federal funds making up the rest at the top. One thing to note here is that while the relative proportion of general fund has decreased since FY25, general fund itself has not decreased. Rather, the use of other funding sources, mainly other non-federal funds, primarily CET funds, has increased more relative to general fund. On the right, you can see the relative share of our expenditures over time broken down by major expense category. Once again, these have been relatively consistent, with personnel expenses in blue making up around 1/3 of the overall budget, and materials and services and cost allocation plan making up the rest. While the relative proportion of personnel expenses has decreased since FY25, actual personnel costs have increased. They just haven't increased as much as budgeted materials and services. This is primarily a result of comparing budget figures in FY26 and FY27 to actual figures in FY25. In PD&R, actual material and services costs often come in well under budget because we want to ensure we have the flexibility in our budget to make big programmatic investments like land acquisitions under the Transit-Oriented Development Program, should those opportunities arise. Next slide, please. So this slide dives deeper into that 21% general fund slice we saw in the previous slides and shows how PD&R's FY27 general fund allocation is budgeted to be spent. Let's start in the top right, the pink land use slice. We are budgeting $3 million of FY27 general fund for these charter and state required activities like urban growth management and future vision. These are activities which don't have other external funding sources. Moving to the left, $2.7 million for additional support for transportation and research. These programs are primarily funded by the recurring federal formula funds we receive as the region's MPO, but an additional investment of general fund allows for an expanded scope of work that embodies Metro's values, which we could not accomplish with federal funding alone. Below that, we have a small slice in contingency. And then we have $1.6 million for programs and services in yellow. This includes construction excise tax or CET grant administration. So Metro Code caps the amount of CET revenue we can use for administration at 5%, which is too low to effectively administer the program. So we supplement it with general fund. It also supports community investment work, like the personnel supporting our brownfields program, since those costs can't be funded with federal dollars. And finally, it also pays for the support data and research staff provide to council and central services. Continuing counterclockwise, in gray, we have unrecoverable overhead and cost allocation plan expenses at $2.8 million. PD&R uses a federally approved indirect rate to recover most of our overhead expenses, including PD&R's portion of the cost allocation plan, or CAP. But a significant portion of the CAP is unrecoverable per federal regulations, so must be covered by general fund. This includes the costs of the council office, the office of the COO, and certain communication expenses. Finally, we have grant match in dark blue. Most of our federal funding, both formula funding and competitive grants, requires that Metro put up a certain amount of non-federal funds in order to receive the federal funds. We are budgeting to use $700,000 of our FY27 general fund allocation to leverage close to $10 million of federal funds. You can see this return on investment in the call-out pie chart to the right, where the small blue slice of $700,000 of general fund leverages $9.6 million in federal funds, shown in gray. Next slide, please. This slide takes the pie chart Catherine presented earlier about where our funding comes from and breaks it down by program area. Federal funding is in blue, 46% overall, and non-federal funding is in gray, 54% overall. As a reminder, the vast majority of our federal funding is formula funding. Unsurprisingly, the transportation program relies most heavily on that federal formula funding, as it is responsible for all of our federally required MPO activities. However, all program areas have some level of support from federal resources. For example, the third bar down, Community Investments and Development. This includes the federally funded portion of our brownfields work, as well as the Transit-Oriented Development, or TOD program. Technically, TOD is funded by local funds from TriMet, but those local funds are contingent on TriMet receiving an equivalent amount of federal funding, which is why we've chosen to show it in blue here. Next slide, please. This is the flip side of the coin. It shows where our funding is going broken down by program area, as well as major expenditure category. Blue are personnel expenses, green are grants and funding to external partners, yellow are other materials and services like consultants and supplies, and pink are overhead expenses, which are allocated across program areas. I want to highlight the green portion, the grants and funding to external partners. They make up nearly 50% of our FY27 budget and are funded by dedicated, restricted funding sources. This funding represents a core element of PD&R's work to advance council priorities. For example, in transportation, that $7 million green slice at the top includes grants under our regional travel options, Safe Routes to Schools, and Safe Streets for All programs. It also includes funding to TriMet under 82nd Avenue, TV Highway, and Better Bus. In community investments and development, that $18.6 million green slice includes the TOD program and CET grants like 2040 grants and community placemaking. And in FY27, it also includes the new CET programs, the Housing Production Accelerator Fund, and Job Ready Lands. Next slide, please. This slide shows PD&R personnel by program area. In FY27, we have 91.2 FTE, which is an increase of 1.4 FTE from FY26, representing a 3% increase in personnel expense. This is due to the addition of 2 limited duration positions that will support the implementation of the new CET funded programs related to housing production and job ready lands. As discussed earlier, PD&R continues to approach staffing decisions conservatively. However, given the variety of funding sources for the department, lower funding availability does not impact all PD&R program areas equally. Some areas, like CET funded programs, are increasing, while others are decreasing or remaining flat. One thing to note is that this slide, like all the previous slides, is by program area, not division or team. So, for example, when a data and research staff person supports a specific transportation project, that portion of their FTE is shown at the top in transportation. PD&R staff, and especially DRC staff, often support multiple program areas. And now I will pass it to Malou.
All right. Good morning. Next slide, please. I'm Malou Wilkinson. I'm the Deputy Director of Planning, Development, and Research, and I use she, her pronouns. And I'm going to share some information about the programs and activities included in our proposed budget modifications. First, I'll describe programs to be funded by construction excise tax reserves. We're really excited that Council has provided guidance to expend some of these reserves to support housing and jobs in our region. Council directed the creation of the Housing Production Accelerator Fund in January of this year to be supported with a $5 million one-time investment of those CET reserves. This fund will support implementation actions identified in Metro's Regional Housing Coordination Strategy, which we just learned this morning was approved by the State Department of Land Conservation and Development. So that is terrific news. It's just breaking. And they'll be looking for us to have a midpoint check-in in 2028. So this investment in the Housing Production Accelerator Fund will really help our region move towards that goal. The Housing Production Accelerator Fund will help to support local jurisdictions in achieving housing production targets, also required by the state, and will help to remove barriers to housing development. One action that I wanted to highlight is the exploration of a regional land bank. You had some questions about it I think that was last week with the Housing Department presentation. We're undertaking this exploration in partnership with the Housing Department, along with with Johannes Walde and the Social Innovation Program. The work right now, this initial phase of work, includes reviewing our agency's existing experience purchasing and holding land for future development. It includes engaging cities, counties, housing providers, community partners, and housing developers through interviews, work groups, and advisory committees, learning about other regional land banks across the country to understand how they work and understand best practices, analyzing and testing options for governance, funding, and focus areas for a regional land bank, and developing a recommendation to bring back to you all for your guidance later this year. The Housing Production Accelerator Fund will support grants and technical assistance to cities and counties to help speed up the planning and permit review process for housing development around the region. It will also allocate funds to supplement our brownfield assessment program. Council also directed the creation of a Job Ready Lands program with a $2 million one-time investment from the CET reserves in March of this year. The Job Ready Lands program will aim to support our region's economy by improving our inventory of employment land. The budget includes 2 new limited duration positions to support this work, 1 senior planner and 1 program coordinator. And as Catherine and David have said, we're looking for ways to be conservative, to retain talent, and align staff with council priorities. So we'll be looking for internal talent where we can to fill these roles. This budget modification includes $400,000 of general fund, which is $300,000 in one-time and $100,000 in ongoing, to cover staff time that cannot be covered by CET funds, as David described earlier. And we're working with our Chief Operating Officer, Madrigal, on changes to the Metro Code and the administrative rules to implement this work. The code changes would clarify that the construction excise tax funds can be distributed for both grants and technical assistance, and would align the definition of affordable housing with state law. Council will be considering an ordinance to implement these code changes next month. We're also working with the COO on changes to the administrative rules that would clarify how staff costs are charged, and add in a section on the Housing Production Accelerator Fund. Once the Job Ready Lands program has been developed, we have time with you next month as well. We will work with the Chief Operating Officer to add that section to the administrative rules as well. Next slide, please. As Catherine said earlier, we're in the middle of updating our 50-year future vision, and the budget includes $570,000 of one-time general fund to complete this work. We're also requesting an extension of our program coordinator to align with the planned completion of that work by the end of FY27. As you know, we're currently working with Council and JPAC to define the scope of work for the 2028 Regional Transportation Plan, which is required to ensure our region is eligible to spend federal transportation dollars. We have included $400,000 of our restricted funds to support contract services for tasks like communications, which would include CBO and business engagement, tribal consultation, finance work, trend analysis, and other technical work. Our third budget amendment is to extend a limited duration position to retain an assistant transportation modeler. We're using existing restricted funding to continue to cover this position, And as we look ahead to the possibility of staff turnover in our department in the near future, it's really important for us to retain this newly trained talent and grow our capacity as a department. And now I'll turn it back to Catherine to wrap us up.
That's great. Thank you. Next slide, please. This is our final slide. The key takeaways on this slide echo where we started, which was taking a conservative approach to staffing, which I think we've described in the face of uncertainty. I do not need to explain to you all what that uncertainty looks like. I know you have experienced it really in every walk of your lives and your leadership, both here and in community. And also just responding strategically to the region's needs. And I guess I would close by saying, I hope you all recognize your fingerprints on this work. And we really, in our department, are grateful for this council's interest, your input, your engagement, your questions, your critiques, and just your strategic leadership moving forward. So we will leave it there and welcome questions and feedback.
Great. Thank you so much for the presentation, colleagues. Councilor Lewis.
Thank you. I'm really impressed by the amount of work that your department is able to accomplish. You've got a relatively small crew and your FTE shows that you've remained stable over the past few years, despite so many of your staff being federally funded and the uncertainties there. So thank you. My first question is regarding the materials and services budget. It sounds like within materials and services, you do have the funds for site acquisition. And I'm just wondering why we don't have a capital fund call out, because if we're reserving those funds for a capital expense, it doesn't make sense that it's in materials and services. It kind of confuses this kind of year over year comparison to how the budget activity actually plays out. And I also think capital funds are just inherently different. So if you could talk to me a little bit about why that's missing from your department's budget.
I might have to get back to you. We've never in the history of the TOD program treated those assets as capital expenditures. So there are the TOD program has two different forms of expenditures. There are grants that we provide to developers, which just go out as grants. But even the land acquisitions that we do acquire are defined in our accounting as program purchases and not as capital expenditures. But I'll have to get back to you as to the history of why that decision was made.
Okay. And I'm guessing that most of it we're doing re-granting and we're originally receiving the grant from either the state or the feds. Does that maybe line up?
In terms of where the money we get comes from to do that. So the TOD program is primarily funded by a fund exchange agreement that's decades old with TriMet, in which we provide TriMet with additional federal dollars from the Regional Flexible Fund Allocation, or RFA. And TriMet in exchange gives us local TriMet funding in order to operate the TOD program. So the TOD program is primarily funded by those local TriMet dollars. Occasionally, we receive one-off grants. So a couple of years ago, we received a grant for $5 million from the state of Oregon, for 82nd Avenue. But typically, it's the ongoing annual funding we receive from TriMet through that fund exchange.
Okay, great, thank you. Second question is around Housing Accelerator Fund. I understand that we do hope that it lasts us 3 to 5 years, but why are we only programming $2 million in the first year? I think there's a lot of pent-up demand, and I'm very worried that $2 million will not be enough for year one, and we're gonna have to do a mid-year budget modification and slow down what's already a slow process or something with the word accelerate in the title.
I'm going to give you a super quick answer and then I'm going to let Malou elaborate. We really are looking realistically at what we think we can staff up and get out the door quickly. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Malou, see if you have more detail.
Thank you, Catherine, and thank you, Councilor Lewis, for the question. I think I don't see a November budget amendment as a challenge if we are starting to get the money out the door really quickly. We are ready to work with David and our finance department We're trying to be realistic in our budgeting rather than have too much in there. So it's an estimate, and if we can get the money out faster, we would be thrilled. So that is our goal. And we hope to be coming back to you all for a budget amendment to get more of the money out the door.
Great. I know of 2 applications that will come in on day 3 from District 2, so. we're
So
ready.
excited to hear that.
Good.
Councilor Rosenblum.
Thank you, Acting Chair Huang. First of all, I think I wasn't going to ask this question, but Councilor Lewis brought it up. So in the TOD, we haven't, the purchasing of land, we have put into a separate category. If we move into the land banking, will we have to reevaluate those categories of how we expenditure? Will that be, I assume that would have to be under capital, and we'd have to have a pot for those capital expenditures, because I don't think we could do the same procedure as we do for TOD funding. Maybe that's not true, but that's something that we need to look at. I want to clarify 2 things. Small questions, I guess. First of all, the 5 million is not a lot. I'm assuming we're going to spend most of that, or most of that's going to be allocated to small jurisdictions for them to evaluate ways they can speed up housing. And then on the $2 million, it would seem that the $2 million could easily be eaten up just by evaluating additional brownfields. I know we've done the evaluation for a couple routes, but we haven't done brownfields evaluations thoroughly throughout the region. So I'm just wondering if that will likely eat all the 2 million allocation up. And then I have a sort of a larger question having to do with data.
Thank you, Councilor, for those questions. I think I'll do a little bit of air traffic control. Why don't we start with the accounting question?
Sure, yeah, so one of the first, or sort of the phase we're at now, is a very sort of like early examination phase. And one of the things they're examining with the land banking idea is what would these financial structures look like? What would these legal structures look like? We're still at the very, very early stages of that. But that is exactly the type of question that would be examined through that process.
And then Malou, if you could address the small cities question.
Yes, and can I just add a little bit to David's answer on the land banking? I think we don't know where, one of the exciting opportunities in this land banking exploration is to see what the best entity would be to manage a land bank for our region. One of the opportunities is to be able to move faster than we as a government can move, should there be another entity that is able to take quicker advantage of opportunities. We are also really excited to be working with Johannes in his conversations with foundations. And so there might be other ways to bring other funding in to bring more land to the table to address our housing crisis. So I think that the question of how we would account for money is really far away into the future. So I just wanted to have that little bit of extra there. When it comes to the $5 million for the Housing Accelerator Fund, we do not have we are about to start listening sessions with our local partners around the region. We don't have a preconceived notion as to whether more of them, where the money should go, to smaller jurisdictions or bigger jurisdictions, or what that looks like. We want to be sure that we're responding to what our local partners need the most. And so we will be stretching that money as far as it can go. And if it all gets used up, then it will be I think we'll be celebrating that, and we'll be working with you all to figure out how to find more money to get out to our local partners to accelerate housing across the region. So I don't have an exact answer, but we're working with our partners to figure out the approach.
And then the 2 million brownfields question, I think, would be awesome.
So the $2 million for job ready lands is not,
Maybe I should have asked that. That is really more in line with the WEA presentation requests for a better clarification of the kind of job ready lands. That's where it's going to be. I think I misasked that question.
Maybe I could tackle that. We have not yet gotten to a place where we have really mapped out what that money set aside for the Job Ready Lands program will go to. We would not expect it to be, I think your word was eaten up by any programmatic expenditure, at least not at this point. We're still in the early stages of building the program and building the steps. So that money is likely to end up supporting a number of different program elements. Again, as Malou said, we'll be coming back to you once the program is built to look at ways we can get more resources for it. And then the last thing I'll say about the Job Ready Lands program is we do have a council work session on it with you all next week. And it'll be great to come and just share a little bit more about the way the program development is evolving. Yeah, thank you.
And if I might, one follow-up question. Data centers and data, I mean, we do data. We've started out, when we first started out as a database regional resource, it was a largely static data. In other words, geospatial data that we had. Now we have data that's coming in all sorts of forms. I'm wondering if perhaps the question of the role of modern data streams and artificial intelligence in regional governance is a subject that perhaps deserves further discussion, thought, and conflict resolution. We realize that it's going to be one of the biggest issues in the legislature this time, and perhaps it's a topic that we may need to weigh in on even coming up to this next session. But I think we're all aware that this is something that has caught everybody's attention. And we've talked about AI before, but I'm just wondering if that's something that perhaps a workshop on the role of AI and modern data streams in future governance might be something that we should be thinking about.
Thank you, Councilor. I know that is, thank you. I know that is a question at the forefront of many people's minds, including Madeline, who was up here earlier, including Cindy, who is another manager in the Data Resource Center, but also broadly across Metro. There's the IT department is undertaking a number of new initiatives around data and around AI. They're working closely with our Data Resource Center and others. We fully expect to be deeply engaged in that conversation, because even in the day-to-day activities that we bring the results to you, we're already using AI. We're already thinking about how we can shortcut processes, make things more efficient, get better data, test it more, and so we are not going to necessarily be the department that would bring alone a conversation, but we would love to collaborate more broadly with other parts of Metro to ask and answer some of those questions. And as Malou just pointed out, on the data center piece, which is more of a land use piece, we do have some time scheduled to come to you all, roughly scheduled right now in October, to talk about the land and resource needs for data centers and the way those fit into our sort of overall ecosystem of technology and land use. But I think that's different from the question you were asking, which is a great question and super high interest to us.
Well, there's actually, you pointed out two questions that I was really asking. And obviously, one of the things is the governor has a task force on data centers. And I don't know exactly what their schedule is, but I mean, keeping appraised of what they're talking about and how that might affect both our land use issues as well as, our transportation planning issues is something that I think we're interested in.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate your calling out the connection. There is a pretty tight connection there between land use and growth management and data and electricity and transportation and infrastructure. It's all a Gordian knot for sure. Thank you.
Thanks. Councilor Gonzalez.
Exactly, Chair Wong. Well, just really happy to see the Accelerator Fund be programmed and that work beginning to make an impact for much needed housing. I have a question. It was around the web engagements too. I mean, in 2 years, they've doubled from 180 million to 360 million. Can we talk about what, or we anticipate, sorry, 360 million will be the forecast for next year. Can we talk about the origination of what we, like, what are the underlying variables that we're factoring for that?
Thank you, Councilor.
And what does that actually mean for, like, do our costs increase because there's more electricity, or is it just a measure to say this is a really useful resource? And to the question that Councilor Rosenthal made, is this growth in the use of our data, AI and different tools that are trying to, so anyway, just curious.
Thank you so much for that question, Acting Council President. Is it all right if I invite Madeline back up? Thank you. And while Madeline Steele is coming up to answer the specific AI technical elements of your question, I will say that we are not at this point. You see that budget performance measure, it doesn't reflect additional investment there. It's really intended to show the relevance and usefulness of the tool.
Yeah, no, for sure. For sure. I totally get that.
Yes, thank you for the question, Councilor Gonzalez. Just to underscore what Catherine said, we do not need to expand our server. It's able to take this load fine. We do have a sense of where these requests are coming from. Many of them are coming from automated processes of our partners who are regularly getting the latest, greatest data from our databases. Some of them are coming from increased use of our tools like MetroMap or our aerial imagery services. Some of them may be from automated processes like bots. We don't have 100% clarity on all of this. This is a metric that we have. We've been tracking for years, so we're able to present it. And we do think that it's a great proxy for the usefulness of the data. So we feel good about that. I don't know about the AI piece specifically. It may be that people are writing more scripts now that they have Claude and other tools available to them, and so more activity will continue to be generated by that. But yes, something we're certainly watching with interest. Right now, we're fully able to take the load, and we feel great about providing all this data to the public.
Yeah, great. I mean, it seems like we're going to be getting, assuming the forecast plays out, 1 million hits a day, basically, which is a pretty big deal when you think about it that way. So I think something I'm kind of curious to do as well as a counselor for Metro and as a person out in my district and stuff, just talking about the value that this research and data brings to people. I don't feel it's something that I'm always talking about in kind of like my top 5 slides, I guess you could say. So this definitely piqued an interest in terms of maybe what's more like the nuts and bolts of a service that we've provided to our partners for a long time. And I know that we've done great work in this area, but it's just resurfaced it a little bit more. So I appreciate that. So a question for job ready lands, and maybe a segue question to can you remind me, this is not even a budget question really, but what our role is with EOAs, economic opportunity analyses in the region. I've just had a lot of people engage me about the city of Portland's EOA, and I know maybe a year or two ago, we were very engaged on one with the city of Hillsborough and the use of data. So there's kind of like all the things blended together for me for me to ask a question about that.
Thank you, Councilor. I'm going to direct the question about EOAs to Malou, and then we can tag team the job ready lands questions that might flow out of that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the question, Councilor Gonzalez. As you know, the state Goal 9, State Land Use Planning Goal 9 requires local jurisdictions to develop economic opportunity analyses. And the State Department of Land Conservation and Development reviews those economic opportunity analyses. Metro is not required to develop an economic opportunity analysis. Our role in the local EOAs is to review them as we review all land use actions that are taken by our local city, the cities within our jurisdiction. And so we review them. That's what you recall when the city of Hillsborough was working on their EOA. And generally, the forecast numbers that are used in the city's EOAs are, need to be aligned with Metro's numbers. And so that's our role. And what we haven't done and what we've been talking about, I'm going to segue a little bit to
Perfect.
Job Ready Land, then you can take over, Catherine. What we haven't done in the past is really look at all of the economic opportunity analyses across the region and put them in one place together to understand how, while we don't need to do a regional EOA, it is helpful for us in the context particularly of Job Ready Land to look at what all of our local partners are interested in doing apart, beyond just reviewing it when they complete it and DLCD sends it to us. So that's another step in the Job Ready Land work that we're looking forward to, is looking at all of the EOAs together and being able to talk about them in that context. And I'll turn the rest over to you.
Thank you, Malou. That's a great answer. And the thing I would do the thing I would add is to sort of take us back to one of the things that evolved during the council work group talking about economic development, which is really looking carefully at Metro's role in economic development and making sure that as we're sort of looking at the regional ecosystem of players, that we aren't stepping into other people's roles, but that we really are playing a convening role and a sort of overall policy and funding role. And what Malou just said it's exactly right for the EOAs as well. That said, as part of the Job Ready Lands program, there is going to be a need to take the information that's available regionally and look at the players who are using that information now and make sure that we're convening a conversation about what's working and where the gaps are.
Yeah, great. Thank you. That's a really great segue. You kind of already answered most of my question before I even had to ask it. But I mean, one of the with the work group, but also with the work plan for the Job Ready Lands aspect, I completely agree that we need to have a very specific role and allow our local partners to excel and flourish in the work that they do. One of the gray areas or Venn diagram areas where, especially with the last urban growth management decision that we did in Sherwood, is what feels like questions around, like, can the region align around the slopes, around different kind of indicators of what actually is a job ready land. And I think what I am learning as a good student does, and asking questions and being open to perspectives, is that different jurisdictions kind of assume pretty different things with relation to what those things are. And so as I want to respect like the local authority and autonomy, and also if folks are, one of the concerns that I'm hearing in the work that the city of Portland is doing with their EOA is assuming very high slopes that people are like, that doesn't feel realistic. It's anyway, that's more of a small nuance thing. But with respect to the budget and the work that we're going to be doing forward, I am kind of curious how this Job Ready Lands program, not just as an investment for wanting to create these really developable or whatever places for jobs to come, but also for us to begin to create more of a unified vision around what actually is a single story that we can tell about lands that are ready for jobs. And I feel like I'm hearing there's a lot of different narratives and perspectives out there. And I can't think of a better place than Metro than for us to actually validate, is that data true? Is it not true? Is this just, some industrial developer trying to pull a fast one on folks? I actually want to have a single vision. And right now I feel like there's a lot of visions and a lot of opinions. And it's hard to say with a strong confidence, this is what the region actually has. This is what we need to do, et cetera. And I think that work is going to happen. But talk to me about that, especially as it relates to some of these like EOAs and what other jurisdictions might assume. Do we agree with their assumptions? I know for the city of Hillsborough, we didn't agree with their assumptions. So we intervened.
Thank you, Councilor. I think that is a really important question, and it, as I mentioned earlier, we'll be coming to you next week, sort of mapping out, spoiler alert, we have a chart for you with some actions and some questions along the lines of what you're talking about, not as specific, but really driving toward how do we get to regional agreement on some of these things. That said, what I'm hearing in your question is something that our team can take back and think about in advance of that session, which is not just what do we do, but sort of what is our purpose statement and how do we articulate that purpose statement and how do we make sure we're doing compelling communications before, during, and after the work.
Yeah, thanks. And I know a few weeks ago, we had West Side Economic Alliance come and make a presentation with some, like with a memo of ideas, or I don't know if recommendations to the council or to Metro. So I do want to make sure that we also are able to land those things in a way that feels right with the Strawberry Lands. I mean, there's multiple things that I feel like we've been working on or partners have brought to us. And I just want to make sure that that work keeps moving forward and that we land it, right? Not that it, and that if we need to have more deliberation and discussion and disagreement, then let's do it. I'm happy to do it. So that is that question. And then my last question was around, I'm fairly certain that the Portland State transportation class is funded through your department. Is that right?
That's
so. I know that the council worked on reformatting, making it more regional. Just some highlights.
Yeah.
How's that going? How's enrollment? How are the young people and or non-young people in that class? How are we supporting and nurturing, transportation leadership and passion for our communities?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question, Counselor. In fact, I did talk to you about it, but we renamed it, and I did not necessarily give you the through line between the old transportation class and what we're now calling the Community Transportation Academy. It's been great.
Action, CTA,
yes, it's underway. We've had about 60 students go through. It's a real mix of community activists and interested neighborhood folks from around the region and PSU students. How Hagedorn and her team have really been leading that work and led the creation of a pretty strong partnership with PSU. We have really looked at how we're setting up presentations for the course to help give people the kind of knowledge that they can use to engage in transportation advocacy and issues and track things that can take years and years and years to come from idea to fruition. Ted went recently, said it was a really engaged group, had a nice time.
Had a great
speaking
time.
there. Yep. So I think the regional format has been really successful and huge kudos to How and her team for pulling
So
that together.
when does the class happen? What's the cost? Like, how
We'll
do
get
people
back
get
to you about
enrolled?
that. I don't
Yeah.
have that level of detail, but
Good.
happy to get back.
Just want to make sure people from all the region are able
Yeah,
to
thank
participate
you.
in this great academy.
And just a reminder, I can't remember if you said this, Catherine, but it is funded through a partnership with TriMet and ODOT. And so, and Metro. So we have IGAs with our partners and it's funded that way, working with Portland State.
Love it. Regionalism at work.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks. A couple questions from me. Just going back to the kind of uncertainty and volatility, can you articulate now which federal competitive grants that were awarded and didn't actually get? And then are they like denied, canceled now? Or are they still kind of like in zombie state? Like, how are we thinking about, like, I don't know which grants were specifically referenced, but can you talk a little bit more about that?
I'm going to have David answer that question specifically, but I did want to frame it up first by saying there are the grants that we haven't gotten or delayed. And there is also, quite honestly, an overall chill feeling in terms of the grants that we are that we historically would have been applying for and moving forward. And Malou may talk about that at the end too, because there are some federal funding opportunities for major projects that we are continuing to pursue, but you know, we look at in a slightly different way. But if you would talk about the specific grants.
Yeah, so we had three competitive grants that we applied for and won. We were told our application was successful. That were then sort of the execution of the grant awards themselves was sort of put in limbo and paused for over a year. Those three grants were a Safe Streets for All pilot program in North Portland for, I think it was $1.1 million. And then there were two reconnecting community programs one related to 82nd Avenue, one related to TV Highway. Both of those were for $2 million each. We actually just a couple of weeks ago, I think, executed the award for the Safe Streets for All program in North Portland. So that those funds are obligated, and we have started that program. The reconnecting community programs are still in limbo. We were told several months ago that the $2 million for TV Highway was, quote, cleared for obligation, but we haven't heard anything since then. So those are still pending awards. They are not budgeted in FY27. So if we do receive them, then we'll be coming with a very happy budget amendment.
And those are the only three that were kind of in limbo. Okay.
Correct.
Great, thanks. And it's just some comments on the land bank and TOD program. I'm really excited for it, but I'd encourage us to think about how we make it as revolving as possible. I know for the $5 million for 82nd, I think that's the intent, is to like recoup some of the expenditures for future acquisition. And I think it was an opportunity lost for the TOD program when in the previous housing bond, we basically used our loan acquisition funds as one-time expenses. Because I think if we had those monies now, we'd be taking advantage of some screaming deals all across the region. So I think as you think about the land bank, and I don't know if this has like a budget implication, because I think it's not a capital cost because we're basically buying and holding land. And I think that could be one of the benefits of, you know, whatever land bank program we have is, you know, instead of just giving up the land basically, that we take on the holding costs and are able to move with speed. And those are two advantages, but having the ability to kind of recoup some of those expenses for future acquisition to keep it going seems like it would be, you know, a real positive to explore. So I'm hoping that, you know, that is part of the exploration process for how do we stretch our dollars over time rather than pushing it all out in a couple of years type of thing.
Thank you. Thank you for that observation. I know the team is thinking about that a lot and thinking about how to structure it that way.
Okay, Councilor Nolan.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the presentation. A wide variety of things going on. I'm going to piggyback on the discussion on the land banking. Do we have local partners within or adjacent to the Metropolitan Service District who already operate land banks?
Councilor Nolan, we'll have to get back to you on that question.
Okay, I think it'd be interesting to know how long they've been operating, how successful they've been, what tactics they've used that have been particularly successful. If we have that local knowledge, it would help us bring real value to this program.
To my knowledge, I don't think there's like explicit land banks. I think a lot of public jurisdictions own a lot of property, but they're not intended to be repackaged and, you know, developed sort of thing. At least that's what I've seen.
That's why I'm asking the question, because I haven't done the research. And I actually get the sense that there are some that are intentionally, although perhaps not overtly, land banking.
Thank you, Counselor. And Malou, do you want to talk a little bit about the consultant work that's the first step in this that might shed a little bit of light on some of that?
Yes, absolutely. So we are contracting right now with a consultant to facilitate a series of conversations with our partners around the region. And I think that is both a way for us to learn and a way for us to bring information, a way for us to determine the best path forward for our region. We also have been doing a lot of research around the country so that we can bring those best practices to you all and to these work sessions with our partners. So I think that work will really shed some light. We've, we talked a bit about land banking in a region like ours that does not have a lot of we're not Detroit where we have a lot of inner city abandoned properties, which Detroit doesn't have in the level that some of us might imagine who don't go there very often anymore, but places more like Denver that are similar markets to ours. So we'll be bringing you all of that information. I think if we, whatever we can learn locally within our state is very helpful because it's working within the same legal environment that we have here. But we don't have terrific examples within our region right now, or we would be really thrilled that they were operating.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you so much. And
Mr. Chair, if I might have one follow-up.
oh, please, yeah.
Certainly, if there are local examples that of partners who are running formal or informal land banks, we can learn from what tactics they use that are successful. If we're going to move to a regional plan, and I certainly support that, it will be really helpful to know how our local partners can become invested in a regional approach to this and not local competition among the cities in particular within the region.
Thank you. That's really important.
All right. Well, seeing no more questions, thank you so much. I definitely see council's kind of fingerprints all over that. So thank you for incorporating our strategic directions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to central services. So we'll have our Deputy Chief Operating Officers, Andrew Scott and Holly Calhoun, up for the next two presentations.
Acting president asked me to make sure y'all get going.
Great. I think that's my cue to lead off. All right. Well, introduce ourselves as we go through. Good morning, Andrew Scott. I'm one of Metro's deputy COs. I'm joined today by Holly Calhoun and Brian Kennedy. Today, we're going to review the Central Service Department budgets for fiscal year 26-27. That's going to include, and actually you can go to the next slide. That includes Capital Asset Management Department, Human Resources, Communications, DEI, Finance, IT, as well as some non-departmental expenses, most prominently our Enterprise Resource Planning Project, or ERP. Next slide, please. So this chart includes the breakdown of central services budgets. All of these departments and programs are funded by our cost allocation plan, or our CAP, along with some unrestricted general fund revenue. And the cost allocation plan is funded by transfers from external departments. So WPES, Parks, the Zoo, et cetera, they pay for the central service departments and programs that support them. That's how the funding flows within the agency. You'll see on here, there's a slice for other general fund, 13%. I just want to note that includes the Office of Metro Attorney and the Auditor, which you've already had separate budget presentations on. And then that also includes the new Risk Readiness and Resilience Program, or what we're referring to as the R3 program, special appropriations, as well as the Loan to Prosper Portland for the James Beard Food Hall. And then I will also note the other slice of the pie, Council and Office of the COO, that's 16.7%. We have a separate presentation on that you're going to hear right after we finish central services. So you get us for a little while, but we will try and go quickly through this. Next slide, please. So before we dive into specific central service budgets, I wanted to take a moment to talk about performance management and performance metrics at Metro. Measuring performance is important in any organization. I think it's particularly important for government, and it's also particularly challenging in government and in the public sector. Unlike a private sector company, we don't have a bottom line that we need to meet in order to be profitable. And generally, governments can't and don't go out of business, which makes it all the more important that we have some way of evaluating whether or not we're being effective. When I got to Metro in 2018, I think it's fair to say that our performance measures were not great. We reported them every year, but they weren't really being used in any systemic way to change or improve how we provide services. And so in 2018 and 2019, we decided to revamp those measures and engaged in what we expected to be about a 12 to 18 month process. Unfortunately, COVID got in the way of that timeline. We spent a lot of time just making sure we keep the doors open and continuity of operations. But we did get back to this after we got through some of the COVID crisis. And starting 2 years ago, we relaunched performance management at Metro. And this is going to be the third year that we've included some new and improved performance measures in our budget. And I want to note this is still very much a work in progress. I think we've made a lot of improvements. There are still areas we're focused on and conversations we're happening with different departments. But that said, we are currently tracking 39 performance measures across the organization. We have 16 dashboards that allow us to explore the data and see trends over time. Next slide. What you see here is a slide that just shows the front page for our performance dashboard, that one of the performance dashboards we're currently using. Back in 2023, we asked departments to tie their performance measures to Council's adopted strategic targets of housing, climate, and a resilient economy. And so that's why you see those categories up here. We also included a support and logistics category as a catch-all for some of the central services that may not fit into those three, but that you're going to hear a little bit more about today. And then I just want to note, as Council continues to have conversations about your priorities for Metro, we are intentionally trying to build a flexible system that can adapt to changes in those priorities as we go along. Next slide. So in terms of where we're headed with performance, there are really three things I wanted to focus on here. One is operational indicators. Many of our existing measures focus on high-level outcomes, which is great, and that's a key part of performance measurement. But we also want to make sure we're providing a more robust picture of measures that support our ongoing operations. So we've been working with departments to develop a suite of measures that track inputs, outputs, as well as outcomes. Second, in terms of analysis and improvement, the goal of any performance management system should not be, and really cannot be, to simply track and report measures, but to use those measures to inform our analysis of the problems we're trying to solve and the services we're providing. And to be really direct here, there's not much reason to do performance tracking if you're not analyzing the data with that lens. And so along those lines, we are using performance measures to inform and improve our operations policies and agency-wide priorities. We're continuing to build a process improvement training program at Metro that educates our staff on the principles of process improvement and empowers them to make positive changes in the program that they work on. So again, we can see some improvements in these metrics. And then I think lastly, what I'm pretty excited about, we can use these metrics to identify areas where either the COO or council see a problem that needs to be solved. And then we can convene working groups to identify solutions to those problems. And finally, I want to note how we're going to refine measures over time. And it's similar to what I referred to on the last slide in terms of building a flexible system. There's a real benefit to tracking data over time and seeing the longitudinal trends of a particular measure. But good performance management also changes based on priorities. We may mature out of certain measures. We may find that we are tracking the wrong thing and want to track something different. And what we want to do with this system is focus on what's most important to us operationally, what's most important to you from a policy and priorities perspective, what's most important to the region from a livability perspective. And a good performance management system is flexible and adaptive enough to change as those priorities or policy approaches change. So before I continue on to department-specific presentations, I just wanted to pause for a minute, see if there are any questions about these slides on performance management at Metro. It is, as I mentioned, very much a work in progress, but it's also something I'm pretty excited about that I think we can see some real positive things coming out of. Nope, not seeing any. Great. Let's go ahead and move on, and we can do 2 slides now. I'm going to talk a little bit about Capital Asset Management Department, or CAM. This is a relatively new department at Metro. It was created in 2019 to ensure expertise into how capital projects are being managed, and also to bring an agency-wide strategic approach into how we're advancing our sustainability and asset management goals. With Council's support and funding, CAM has made progress in key areas of sustainability, asset management, capital project delivery. And just for a couple of examples, CAM leads the implementation of about $280 million in capital improvement projects. That's about 146 projects, and ensuring compliance with over 500 sustainability requirements. CAM helps conduct facility condition assessments, which are really key to managing our facilities, and has also been working to advance our EV infrastructure in alignment with Council's environmental strategic target. And then I want to note that this year CAM launched Metro's Historic Preservation Office program. This program will ensure that Metro protects historic cultural resources while efficiently delivering capital projects. And CAM worked really closely with Metro's Tribal Affairs to advance this key priority of our Tribal Affairs agenda. Next slide. So FY 26-27 overview of CAM, it includes just over 30 FTE, and it's mainly funded from cost allocation plan resources, although I will note on the construction project management side, those projects are funded directly from the departments that benefit from them. Within capital asset management, there are 5 programs. There's the asset management program, the capital project management office, sustainability program, the historic preservation office I mentioned, and also Metro Regional Center campus operations. So CAM runs this building as well. And then of their budget, the $6.9 million, it includes about $5.7 million for personnel and $1.3 million for M&S, and then also just over $2 million for general asset management fund that supports improvements to the Metro Regional Center and several sustainability projects. Next slide. You can see here a little bit of budget history. If you're curious, most of the changes in CAM's FTE were related to budget reductions taken in the 25-26 year, the current year. And then there's also a reorganization, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a few minutes, in 26-27 that moves some of the staff within CAM into the Risk Readiness and Resilience program. And the next slide, just to talk about 2 budget modifications in CAM. First of all, they requested $100,000 in one-time funds just as a carryover. Council previously awarded this funding for the Historic Preservation Officer. We're asking to carry these funds over so we can conduct research and survey Metro sites and support the overall program development. And then I do want to note that our Historic Preservation Officer was hired just recently in spring of 2026 and has been collaborating with departments as we establish and get this program off the ground. And then second, CAM requested another FTE that's going to help lead process improvements and standards development within our construction project management office. To fund this position, CAM is reducing some other budget line items internally, and then there's just a remaining gap of about $34,000 that's being requested. And then next slide, this is the final slide for CAM. In terms of some of those performance measures that I was referring to, these are 2 for the CAM department. One shows water use and the other shows fossil or natural gas use at Metro facilities. And these measures really allow us to track progress towards Council's adopted sustainability goals and identify opportunities for improvement. This only goes back to fiscal year 21, but we've actually made significant progress and we've been on a downward trend since our baseline in 2008. Electricity use has decreased by 21%, fossil gas use has decreased by 25%, and water use has decreased by 42%. So those long-term trends are really good. I do want to note that recent use has leveled out. We had a temporary dip during the pandemic, which makes sense, but it has leveled out. And so we're continuing to track this usage, also working on some other sustainability metrics that will track some of the key factors in Metro Sustainability Plan. And with that, I will turn it over to Holly.
Thank you so much. Holly Calhoun, Metro's other Deputy Chief Operating Officer. And I'm going to start with an overview of human resources. You can go to the next slide. So I just want to start by saying the only constant in HR is the need to change. The workplace is evolving rapidly, and the budget modifications that you'll see here really reflect their agility in response to that. The beginning of the fiscal year, they had a budget reduction of 2 FTE within the recruitment team, and that was due to a downward trend in hiring. And then you all supported a mid-year investment in a new ADA specialist. And that is really in response to the growing demand and complexity in accommodation requests across the organization. I think it's helpful to note too that both of those trends, both the reduction in hiring and increase in volume and complexity of accommodations, is really on trend with what we see across the nation. So we are not an outlier in any way. I also want to give just some love to the HR team. There's a lot about this team that we have to be incredibly proud of. And so I'm going to try my best to summarize and go through that. Starting with the labor relations team, they are engaged in successor bargaining for 4 collective bargaining contracts at the moment. And they continue to navigate a high demand of interim bargaining. And so as an example, in the past fiscal year, they bargained 15 new policies, most of which required interim bargaining with our labor partners. And while some of those policy changes are certainly in response to federal law changes, a lot of them were also just to align policy and practice to make sure that we were really clear around our standards. And much more effective than just the policy update was the thought that went into the implementation of those policies. That included communication strategies, trainings, and resources to not only ensure that we're a more compliant organization, but to set up our employees for success. They also played an integral role in supporting organizational changes. So I'm going to give some stats that I think really reflect the both volume, complexity, and breadth of this department. They conducted 78 investigations, and excuse me, this is fiscal year to date. They navigated 27 grievances and responded to over 250 employee relations issues. They led the interactive process for nearly 70 workplace accommodations. The HR training team will be providing more than 12,000 e-learning hours and 98 in-person training courses and 23 live webcasts. They recruited and hired 170 new employees. They facilitated 70 plus internal transfers and promotions, and they reclassified 23 positions. They also just provided critical support during challenging times. We had a reduction in our workforce, which includes in complex bumping and transfers. And we also had the closure of our Metro Paint operations. Our HR team plays an integral role in those staffing changes. In addition to that essential day-to-day support, they also made some just big investments and initiatives across the organization. They launched the job description initiative, which included updating over 680 job descriptions. They launched the Leadership Skills Development Series, which equips our managers and supervisors with skills to be more effective leaders. And they completed all of the legal requirements associated with the Oregon Equal Pay Act, which concludes a multi-year effort to comply and reinforce our commitment to pay equity. Next slide, please. The proposed HR budget includes 33 FTE and a total appropriation of $7.6 million. The majority of this budget is dedicated to personnel costs, leaving about $650,000-ish in M&S. And it's important to note that of that M&S, over 70% of it is earmarked for agency-wide services and programs. That includes benefits administration through a broker, third-party administrators for unemployment and COBRA, retirement plan advisors, training courses, our labor relations tracking system, and miscellaneous engagement activities like the Employee Service Award. Next slide, please. So there aren't really significant changes year over year in the budget. I will note that the percent change in personnel services reflects the ADA specialists I mentioned a moment ago. And the reduction in M&S is just due to the elimination of one-time carryover funds in last year's budget in response to pay equity compliance. Next slide. And they had no budget modifications, excuse me. Okay, next slide. I'm going to move on to performance measures first. So HR oversees two key performance measures. One is around training compliance and one is around turnover. So I'll start with an overview of the training performance measure. As a reminder, HR monitors compliance with Metro's required learning program. We launched this program in 2022. Prior to that, we had no formal required learning across the agency. And at high level, this program includes a range of annual required training around organ ethics, basic health and safety, mandatory reporting of child abuse, and a series of just workplace safety policy compliance. These courses are essential for supporting employee success, and we have a 90% completion goal for this performance measure. We discussed this last year, but I want to just quickly remind folks as to why that 90% is a stretch goal and not 100%. Our system has no way of removing, without a manual intervention, removing turnovers, termed employees. And so this is going to have a kind of a bloated percent because it's going to have a lag in that loss of employees. It's also tracked fiscal year to fiscal year. And so for an example, we could have an employee that's hired June 25th, and it's going to show them as not compliant, but they really only had a week to complete all the trainings. And lastly, it's a 100% measure. And so an employee may be 90% done with their training, but it's only going to reflect it at 90%. Or is it only going to reflect it as not compliant, excuse me. So the stretch goal, we believe, is still a good stretch goal, but I think even more important is the growth and the improvement that you see from the previous fiscal year. We saw big growth really just around targeted communication strategies and partnerships with our departments. Our second performance measure is around turnover. And turnover is a really important indicator of organizational health. A turnover rate between 10 and 15% is generally considered healthy. It really balances bringing in new talent and retaining institutional knowledge. And as you can see on this chart, Metro experienced a decrease in turnover in the fiscal years after the pandemic, 21, 22, and 23. And then in fiscal year 25, we saw an increase up to 14%. That rise is primarily attributed to the reduction in force. And another quick reminder is that while this performance measure is looking at turnover broadly, we rolled out HR dashboards a couple of years ago that provide a much more in-depth analysis around turnover by demographic, location, job type, etc. Okay, with that, I'm going to move to communications. Next slide, please. And you can move one more slide as well. Okay, so the communications department.
Sorry to interrupt.
Please.
I know that we're kind of going through a gamut of multiple ones, and so should we wait until the end to ask questions, or could we go through each?
Do you have a question now?
I do.
Okay,
I could also write it down and come back, but.
All
right, cool. Thank you. Yeah, on HR, huge fan of our HR team. So this is kind of more of an agency arc question. I know that when Councilor Lewis and I and President Peterson at the time were elected, we were really eager to set the benchmark of becoming an employer of choice, and that had multiple different kind of targets for what we wanted to see across the agency for our employees, the general competitiveness of Metro as an employer. And I'm kind of curious, as we've done so much incredible work. I'm very, very proud of what we've been able to do. And I know that there's probably things that we could still improve on, but I'm curious what that kind of new North Star is for us as we want to maybe recast this benchmark of employer of choice. And yeah, I guess the question is, do we see ourselves as an employer of choice from the staff perspective? And I'm curious to have that conversation. Maybe it's a broader policy discussion about that.
Yeah, I love that question. And I think it's a moving target, and really how we define employer of choice is certainly evolving as well. I would say that right now we have some good data to inform where we sit within that kind of big national picture. I'll be coming next week to talk a bit about our employee engagement survey trends, and that certainly shows a good indicator of how folks feel about their experience, their empowerment within our organization, and that compares across industries across the globe. We look at exit interview as well, right? And so the benefit of HR is we have so many data points to look at the movement of our workforce and some of that qualitative why that I agree with you. I think some continued conversations around what does it mean for us? How do we define that? And how do we then measure towards that? I think to Andrew's comment a bit ago about continuing to up our game around what we're measuring, I think is a really important opportunity and we'd welcome it.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, something that's really important to me is like, I want us to be the best government to work for in Oregon, and like excellent public service and recruiting the best public servants, and to create that environment where the best public servants are like, I want to go work there.
Yeah.
It's kind of is it expensive an investment? Sure, but I think there's value that then pays in dividends. So I just want to continue having that conversation. And seeing how, as y'all do this work with over time, that we're able to kind of maybe, if we need to recast, what does it mean for us? Because there were some really clear targets, I think in 2018, where we saw gaps and opportunities. So I just want to keep leaning in. So thank you for letting me ask a question and just.
And just the other thing I would add to that too is I think global or national turnover data tells a really interesting story around the public sector and some of the trends that we've seen at the federal and then local level. It's introducing the opportunity for more talent. What we are seeing locally at Metro is an increased applicant pool, but not the right skill sets. We have a mismatch there. There's a really important tie-in to actually our communication strategy. How are we telling the story of who we are so folks actually want to work for us? And I think we have some opportunity to improve that.
Thank you.
Councilor Nolan also had a question, looks like.
Thanks. While we're on the topic of HR, you mentioned that some of the performance measurements were it was the mandatory training program, hard to calculate. Kind of raises the question of, if it's hard to calculate that performance measure, maybe it's not the right performance measure, because it's hard to, if we can't calculate it, then we can't use it in management decisions as readily as something that can be measured. What, have you thought about that?
We absolutely have. And I think that hard to calculate is a little narrow when we look at this stat. So we actually have dynamic training dashboards that our directors and managers can look at any point that gives them a snapshot of really where their department is in that moment. As a HR department, we also send compliance reports. So you can really get that in-depth understanding of where your department is. And what we see departments do with that is they will do a department all-staff training day, right, where they're really getting everyone together. And so it's an imperfect measure, but it is not certainly one that we shouldn't be measuring. It's a really critical barometer around the knowledge and awareness and expectations that we have for our workplace. I think the new ERP certainly introduces an opportunity for us to see around more sophisticated reporting, but I think it's a critical measure.
Thanks. And one quick follow-up on that. It's not really a budget question, but you mentioned a number of courses or trainings that are mandatory. I didn't hear anything in your verbal list about training our managers and department directors in agency-wide policies that they should be very familiar with in order to lead their staffs, in including questions about whether we comply with, advance those policies in any research or projects we propose.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. And this metric was really looking at agency-wide training. We also have a twofold series called our Supervisor Essentials training that we require all newly hired and promoted managers to go through. In complement with that, we have updated our Supervisor Essentials policy. And I referenced some of the other policy development that we've done recently. Part of that process improvement was clarifying the supervisor's role and responsibility and ensuring that we are setting them up to be able to fulfill that responsibility. Right. I'm happy to provide more on that, but we absolutely have a kind of higher level expectation for managers.
Excellent. Good to hear. Thanks.
Sure, thank you. Well, we've stopped on HR. I do have a question very specific to our HR staff reduction. So we're losing 2 FTE, and I'm very—
We lost them. Sorry, that was the beginning of the fiscal year.
We have lost them.
Yes.
But my concern is that we are down FTE in our HR department, right, as we are looking at this budget as one where we are about to have to bring an incredible number of staff on with the WPES decision to bring staff internal. Are we staffed up in our HR department enough to handle not only the WPES 22 position loss, but then the add back or the add of Metro South?
Yeah, I will say that our HR team is lean and mighty. I think there's always an opportunity for us to expand. I also think that they are incredibly resourceful. You look at our recruitment data, we certainly have a downward trend. And so our director, Julio, I think made an informed decision to reduce those positions while continuing to monitor it. And I think what's important is not just looking at the volume of recruitments, but the quality of those experiences. So the department also sends a survey after every hire to ask, how was the experience? What was the quality? What was the time? What was your interaction? And we're seeing continued high rates of qualitative experience from that survey. The last piece I would say is as it relates to the changes in WPES workforce and how that implicates our department, how our HR department. We had a lot of lessons learned during the last RIF. A lot of areas within our CBAs that had some ambiguous language, and they did an incredible job working with our labor partners to tighten that up. And so that there's going to be some efficiency and clarity as we move forward that won't require maybe as many resources as we had before. But keeping an eye on what they need and how our workplace is changing is a constant need. But I really appreciate it.
I will just flag that it was either 2 or 3 budgets ago, we added an FTE that was a recruiter specifically for housing. And that was 40 to 50 FTE that they were recruiting for. And here we are not adding any, seeing a loss, and we're explicitly going to be recruiting for between 30 and 40 FTEs. So different ball of wax because they're transfer site folks, not housing folks, but
no, it's incredibly valid. I will say last year alone, we saw about a 20% reduction in hires. We've seen a continued decline this year. The department also restructured the recruitment team. And so that created, again, just a leveling up and it's some efficiency win as well. I think they're at a good place right now, but I certainly don't want to say that mid-year we might not see a change in trend that shifts that current state. I'm looking at my HR director to see if he's feeling okay with that response.
okay.
Appreciate it. Okay, I'm going to move on to communications then.
Actually, I do have a question on it.
No, apologies.
Are you seeing a lot of increase in applicants per position? Like, is that metrics that you track?
We absolutely are. And again, this is the challenge is that there's a mismatch though in those qualifications. What's also interesting, and some of the data is a bit misleading, but you're going to see an increase in federal sector turnover and a leveling of turnover in the kind of more local state government trends. And so that has also created just some industry mismatch as to what we see coming in versus what we're looking for. Our HR or our recruitment department is certainly trying to look at where we're seeing some of those greatest disconnects so we can do some targeted recruitment efforts, but it's a volume increase, not necessarily a quality increase.
And does the department read every application?
We have a system that narrows it. So first it goes through what minimum qualifications are. And then we work with our departments. They have a pretty important role in then continuing to narrow that pool and look at resumes. So no, they do not look at all of them, but I would say we have a philosophy around a pretty broad set of minimum qualifications. And so more move through that pool than don't. Then we have an opportunity to screen those, if that makes sense.
Does that mean you're using like an AI process?
No, I don't think so, right, Julio? We have to manually show if they're qualified or not, and then.
Yeah, I think what you're asking is someone reading the application.
Yes.
And I think the answer is someone in HR is looking at.
Yes, they have to look at it briefly to see if they met the minimum qualifications. I wouldn't say that that's a reviewing of the full experience. It's really just looking at the qualifications to see if they meet it. And that is not automated. So apologies.
Yeah, just ask because I know a lot of companies have AI to
absolutely
sort through the thousands of applications they get. And there's a lot of like bias in those.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. Like any part of AI, there's some real, I think, wins, and then there's some major risks. So we're a hands-on crew right now as it relates to bringing folks in.
And that's more work, but it's good to you.
Yeah,
Okay,
agree. Okay, I'm going to move to communications. The communications department, and this is kind of looking back at the beginning of the fiscal year, they experienced several staffing changes. They had a 3.6 FTE reduction at the beginning of the fiscal year. But more importantly, they initiated several strategic staffing transfers, and I really want to give them love for this. So one example of this is that they integrated the internal communications portfolio, so AKA our employee communications, into the communications department. This had previously sat in our COO's office. And not only did that move strengthen the coordination and alignment of communication functions, but it created a cost savings. So in moving those staff over, we eliminated the manager role that was sitting in the COO's office. Another example is that they actually saw an opportunity to transfer an FTE to our IT department. That not only provided additional capacity to that lean IT team, but it helped address some overlapping functions. And I share these as examples because not only did they sharpen role clarity, reduce duplication, but they delivered measurable cost savings. And I want to make sure that we recognize the department for that. I want to move on to a couple program highlights, still same slide for our communications department. So I think one of the most significant ones is the successful launch of Metro's website and P5's website. This marks a significant milestone in which all of Metro's websites have now officially been completely rebuilt and redesigned. As a reminder, the Zoo and Expo website upgrades went live last year, and the project, which included upgrading thousands of pages of content across Metro's website portfolio, has been a collaborative effort across our departments, communications, and IT. The communications department also launched an upgraded brand identity. The work included expansion of the color palette to provide more high contrast options, a new range of icons to better reflect Metro's work, new templates like the one I'm using for this presentation, and 2 new videos to help tell the story of who we are. They also continued to build out cross-marketing efforts, coordinating across teams on ad buys, and really just looking at any other opportunities to tell that unified story about who we are. And lastly, similar to how I described the need in HR to constantly change, it is critical for our communications function to be nimble and responsive to evolving needs. The communities across our region, no surprise to any of you, are more diverse, digitally connected, and expectation-driven than ever before. They expect government to provide accessible communications across multiple channels. And at the same time, public expectations are not uniform. Some community members rely on digital channels and real-time updates, and others depend on more traditional relationship-based or in-person communications. And I share that just because our new, under the leadership of our new-ish communications director, Katie Henges, the department has navigated shifts in both scope and structure, some of which I alluded to just a moment ago, and will continue to evolve to meet the needs of our kind of evolving community. So we look forward to future conversations with you about that. Next slide, please. Okay, so the communications department budget includes 12.6 FTE dedicated to strategic communications, message development and research, media relations, marketing and digital strategy, social media management, and visual design. In addition, the communications department leads internal communications and oversees the agency's web presence and MetroNet, so AKA our intranet. And they manage a range of key resources that support inclusive public engagement, including translation, interpretation, and accessibility resources. Their M&S fund supports media monitoring, social media management, software subscriptions, and translation and accessibility resources. Next slide, please. So in terms of the budget history and the changes that you're going to see, I alluded to them just a moment ago, but in summary, the 3.6 FTE reduction and the transfer of the 1 FTE to the web team is reflected in that change, and then M&S has remained relatively flat. All right, next slide, please. So I just spoke about the kind of evolving nature of the communications field and our efforts to stay in step with that as a department. So the budget modifications are reflective of that. To this end, $110,000 is requested for position reclassifications to help realign the department structure with agency priorities. This investment includes converting an FTE dedicated to the web team into a supervisor position to help manage social media, marketing design efforts, and to provide the opportunity to give our staff more responsibility, which is necessary. And the $40,000 M&S funding request covers activities that were previously budgeted for in the Office of COO, and that's around our annual town halls and other printed material that we send out to employees. Next slide, please. Okay, so I think the communications performance measures are really a great example of that evolution that Andrew spoke to a moment ago. We are introducing new performance measures today that they better reflect the breadth of work and the outcomes we're trying to influence, but are still narrow in nature. Measuring communications impacts is inherently complex. Outcomes like awareness, trust, and behavior change are harder to quantify and often require multiple data points to fully understand. Our previous metrics that we shared with you last year were around impressions and click-through rates. And while that's helpful, it really just captures people that are already on our website and doesn't show the folks that we are not getting to. So this new performance measure on the number of website visitors is a more expansive measure. It reflects overall visibility and engagement with Metro's information, and it can be further analyzed to understand how people find us, what content resonates, and where improvements are needed. And at the same time, I want to be really clear, this is a limited measure. It tells us volumes and patterns of use, but not necessarily whether we're reaching all of our communities equally or achieving deeper understanding. The second performance measure is around access to information, and it's tracking the number of pages that we translate into languages other than English. And a page is not just a stagnant document, it's a combination of vital resources to ensure that our communities have access to information and services. So we have a goal here, and it provides a way to show progress in expanding access. But there are constraints with this one as well. It certainly, it can shape how far we look at this. There are system limitations though around, is this actually meaningfully changing folks' ability to access our services? So it's still narrow. I think we have a huge opportunity to continue to explore more effective performance measures for communications, and we would love to have that conversation with all of you. So in short, I think these performance measures are certainly a step forward, but they've got some limitations. All right, next slide, please. I'm going to move on to our DEI department, and you can move to one more slide. Okay, so I want to share some of the incredible work within our DEI department over this past fiscal year. As you know, federal policy funding and legal shifts aimed at unwinding decades of social progress have really constrained how equity work can be carried out in the public sector. And I think more importantly, it's required us to be more strategic, agile, and disciplined in how we sustain our equity efforts. Throughout this challenging last couple of years, you as a Metro Council have certainly remained grounded in your commitment to equity and inclusion. But behind the scenes, there's been a lot of work that I think I really want to give credit to, in particular to our DEI department and our DEI director, Sabrina Owens-Wilson. Our role as staff is to operationalize the values that you set forth for us in ways that are effective, sustainable, and compliant with this changing landscape. And our DEI department and our DEI director have been critical in helping us navigate that necessary tension between advancing equity with urgency while still ensuring our approaches are legally sound and defensible. So for this past year, that has included an in-depth review of all of our programs, policies, and practices. The DEI department also continues to partner strategically on key agency-wide department initiatives, including Future Vision, Expo Future, and employee engagement. And as you know, this past fiscal year, the DEI department led a collaborative, consensus-based process to identify an equity framework. This has resulted in a recommendation to adopt targeted universalism, which will be formally brought to council in the near future. A shared equity framework ensures consistency and durability in our approach, but it also strengthens the foundation for updating our strategic plan to advance racial equity. The department also continued to strengthen their compliance arm, identifying strategic opportunities to accelerate accessibility and disability inclusion outcomes. That included building an infrastructure to manage Metro's compliance with Title II of the ADA, which was an example was developing a more robust process to manage Title II complaints. They also have played a key role in Metro's project to comply with DOJ's updated digital accessibility requirements. The department further built out the Equity and Belonging Training Program, including more effective training compliance tracking tools, expanded course offerings, and a guide to help employees select learning pathways. They continued to uplift community voice through the ongoing support of 2 advisory committees, the Committee on Racial Equity and the Committee on Disability Inclusion. And lastly, to strengthen Metro's role as the regional convener to support partners in effectively implementing the Construction Careers Workforce Agreement standards, the department launched a Construction Careers Regional Dashboard, which strengthens our ability to tell a regional story about the impact of this work through both qualitative and quantitative information. Next slide, please. Okay, so the majority of DEI's budget covers personnel costs for the 9.5 FTE within the department. And just quickly, the department oversees 3 portfolios. The first is what we call the Policy and Programs portfolio. It manages our civic engagement capacity building grants, construction career pathways, and core. The Organizational Impact portfolio focuses on equipping employees with tools to embed equity into their work and to build a culture of belonging through ERGs and cross-agency coordination with our department-embedded equity leaders. And lastly, the Accessibility and Disability Inclusion portfolio focuses on ensuring that all people have access to Metro's facilities and services. And I spoke to a couple of the efforts related to Title II just a moment ago. This budget also includes $950,000 for materials and services, half of which is allocated to agency-wide trainings, ERGs, and our advisory committee support, an additional $425,000, which is allocated for civic engagement capacity building grants. Next slide, please. Okay, so the budget history here that you see, the really significant change is just from the budget reductions from the previous fiscal year, which was then offset by a 0.5 FTE that we added back during the November budget modifications, which was essentially converting a 20-hour VHE employee into a regular status. Changes in M&S are primarily due to civic engagement capacity building grants carryover and spend down. Next slide, please. In terms of budget modifications, DEI has a one-time funding request to support the update of the Construction Careers Pathway Regional Workforce Equity Agreement renewal. And I think what's incredibly important about this is the regional partnership aspect. This was a collaborative ask in which the City of Portland and Multnomah County are also contributing equal portions towards the update of this agreement. Next slide, please. Okay, I've got 2 performance measures to share with you from our DEI department. The first is around DEI required learning hours. So I spoke to those kind of compliance policy required training hours in the HR presentation. And this required learning topic is around 4 hours of required DEI learning that we require of all employees. Employees can fulfill those hours by attending formal, external, agency-wide, or department trainings. And they can also submit self-selected learning opportunities for credit. I already shared during the HR overview some of the barriers of why we have a 90% stretch goal instead of 100%. And I think it's even important to note that the administrative burden for our DEI hours is even more burdensome because, again, a lot of those hours are through trainings that were not hosted by Metro. And so there's a review and approval process that our DEI department manages. And hey, we made a big leap this last year in progress towards goals, and that was the result of creative strategies within the departments to reach employees that have variable schedules and work at different sites. The second performance measure focuses on the regional implementation of the Construction Careers Pathways program. This performance measure looks at construction careers implementation regionally. The DEI department continues to serve as the convener of this regional effort, which is projected to cover $1.7 billion of infrastructure projects among the 9 implementing partner agencies in FY27. As a reminder, I mentioned a moment ago the regional dashboard that was rolled out this year, and that really provides much more robust information. I think what's exciting to share is that together in partnership with our implementing partners, we are meeting the goal of 20% work hours completed by apprentices. We are exceeding the 25% goal for hours completed by BIPOC workers, and we are making progress towards the 14% goal for hours completed by women, currently standing at 9%. And with that, I will hand it over to Brian Kennedy, unless there are questions.
On the DEI budget, I think we're getting a recommendation to adopt targeted universalism. How are you budgeting for that, before we have that conversation?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we've really looked at a path forward that assumes or projects an approval or adoption of that framework. There's a lot of work that we can do internally that isn't going to require additional capacity. That's really looking at our structures, our culture, our partnerships, and some of the tools and resources we use. And so I think that as we build out that plan and start with the kind of foundational information and changes that we can make just using internal capacity, that's going to get us a long way and likely through this fiscal year.
I think there's questions at our retreats around, like, are we going to properly invest, in this framework? And what I'm hearing is we're actually not additionally investing. And
I think we are looking at our current resources and pivoting how they focus on their work. And I know that you looked like you were going to add to this as well.
Yes, thank you, Acting President Wong. I think our sort of draft plan is to come forward with a resolution for approval of targeted universalism. Sabrina and I have been talking about, Sabrina, our Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, have been talking about identifying a pilot or two to conduct as part of the approval. And we may come, I don't want to say we won't come and ask for additional resources. We may come, depending on what those projects look like. We have, in the last couple of years, engaged in activities that closely, I would call them like targeted universalism adjacent, where a lot of the principles were incorporated as just part of our normal planning. I think the big question here and the big question that came up at the retreat is about data and how we collect that data ethically and in a culturally appropriate way. And so as we look at, potential pilots, I think we'll be looking at, do we have the existing resources? And, my commitment is that if we don't feel that we have the existing resources to maintain fidelity to the model, that we would come back and talk about that and either request new resources or, reallocate existing resources in order to make sure that happens. I'm very sensitive to, needing to do this right and really honor some of the concerns that came up in the retreats. And I think that those concerns are valid. It's something that we need to step into carefully. So I don't know, hopefully that helps address your concerns.
okay, I think you said, we gotta get it right. So I think when you're ready to have that discussion, please bring it forward.
Excellent.
Councilor Gonzalez.
Thanks. Yeah, I think that reflection on targeted universalism, I'm already calling it TU. Well, still got to call it by its full name. Is really important, and I want to make sure that we really intentionally address the concerns around that to bring people along. And I know there's just big questions that continue to come up about that and culture and things like that. So just want to speak that. I'm glad that Acting President Wong spoke about the refresh and SPREDI, the strategic plan to advance racial equity. Another major refresh that we're doing is construction careers pathways. So almost want to ask the exact same question that Councilor Wong just asked around, we're doing a big refresh and kind of investments, or can you tell us how the budget is reflecting the importance of that refresh and how we want to bring partners along? Because even this slide here reflects almost $4 billion of impact.
Yeah.
And it's one of the most important things that we do, I feel like. So yeah, how's our budget reflecting this refresh and how we're prioritizing it?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I've got our DEI director in case you want to build upon what I'll start by sharing. But you'll
Great.
notice we had the one-time ask for dollars towards the renegotiation of the regional workforce equity agreement. That's going to be a pretty robust process, and it allows us a path to really clarify roles and goals.
Yep.
I want to look at Sabrina to see if there's anything else in terms of the growing of that program that's important to share and or reflected in our budget.
Thank you, Sabrina.
Thank you for the question. I'm Sabrina Owens-Wilson, she, her pronouns. I'm the DEI director here at Metro. Yes, in addition to the collaborative ask to support the refresh of the agreement, which is going to support legal subject matter expertise as well as research that's going to support the table in updating the agreement. We also have funding in our budget that maintains the Regional Collaboration Committee. We have the funds that support that convening of that committee that oversees the implementation and brings together all the implementing partners on a quarterly basis. We also maintain funding to support things like the dashboard and the maintenance. And I think one of the things that we're really interested in with construction careers, and you'll see it as our data has, in the data that we've presented over the years, is we are kind of on a journey. Each year, we're able to report and understand the impact of this work in a different way and building on that regional collaboration around the data. And then the last piece of funding that is in our budget each year is funding to support contractors in being successful in implementing the different elements of the program. And we work with different consultants each year and nonprofits like Latino Built, which provided a training agent guide last year that can be used on all of our projects. And we're working with Espousal this year on supports to contractors as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Sabrina. Wonderful. Well, I just to kind of like put a little button or bow on this presentation. I'm out talking to people a lot right now for extracurriculars, as I would say, related to Metro. And a lot of people right now are asking, their policymakers to lead with values, and your budget is a reflection of your values. And I think it's so important and worth recognizing that we are really committed and staying steady.
Absolutely.
In our racial equity work. Partners are dismantling, watering down, it's taking a step back on DEI work, but I feel really proud that we are keeping our commitments and the belief in this work that it makes this region better for everyone that lives here. And I just feel the need to voice that.
I couldn't agree more. And I would just add, that's where I want to give a lot of credit to our DEI department for challenging us not to be reactive, but to be responsive and really think about continuing to carry those values forward in a really durable way during a time that feels incredibly scary to a lot of us.
Yeah. I know it's scary, but I'm proud of us.
Yep,
for
absolutely.
holding arms.
Okay, I'm going to hand it over to Brian.
Great. Brian Kennedy, Chief Financial Officer here at Metro, he, him pronouns. My portfolio includes finance, information technology, records management, and our enterprise resource planning system project as project sponsor. So I'm going to run through those three budgets. So next slide, get advanced two. So starting with finance, in the current fiscal year, as you might recall, last year we reduced 3 FTE from the finance budget. There was a mid-year approval of an internal policy analyst, policy writer position to help improve our internal policies, not just in finance, but across our central services, really trying to ensure that we keep our policies up to date and they reflect our best practices. In the current budget, we're really focused on the ERP project, again, Enterprise Resource Planning System. really kind of a terrible name for our key finance and human resources systems. It's really kind of undergirds a lot of the work we do in our back office functions. So that process has begun. We have staff working on it today. We're also continuing our capacity in doing outreach to small businesses across the region. As you also may recall from earlier, back in December, we completed the external audit for the last fiscal year with 0 management comments, which is a really high bar. We're very proud of that. And then we make a point every year to work on getting our certificates of achievement in financial reporting, our budget document, and our popular annual financial report from the Government Finance Officers Association. And we received all 3 of those awards again. Next slide, please. In terms of next year's budget, there's slight growth just based on inflation adjustments, cost of living adjustments, but otherwise it really represents a status quo budget for the most part. The most significant change is the transfer of the risk management function to the R3 program. So that represents 3 FTE plus our budget for insurance premiums and claims. That's actually a relatively significant budget, which you'll see in the next slide. And again, otherwise, really focusing on maintaining our existing programs and putting as much of our energy as possible to that ERP implementation to make sure that stays on track. Next slide, please. So looking at the budget, as I noted, overall total expenses are down 30%. That is a reflection of that transfer of the risk management function to R3. Our budget for risk includes our premiums for liability insurance, property insurance, our claims. Those are pretty significant budgets. And then FTE is down, but again, that is a function of that transfer of those staff from one unit to another. Otherwise, it really is a status quo budget. Next slide, please. We had no budget modifications requested for next fiscal year. The view in finance is really focusing on a hiring chill. We think a lot of our work is going to change as part of this ERP implementation, and we don't want to commit to changes until we know what that looks like. So we are carefully looking at every vacancy that comes open and making sure it makes sense to fill it before we move forward. And then we are maintaining our investments in outreach, really focused on small businesses, emerging businesses, underrepresented communities in our procurement work. There's obviously a lot going on in the world, changes in the state program, but we have found that our outreach work is some of the most effective work we do in building knowledge of working with Metro, investing in helping some of these small contractors know how to write proposals for the public sector, which benefits them not just in their work with Metro, but with a variety of public partners. And then really trying to make sure that our departments are also being very proactive in letting interested communities know about opportunities for working with Metro. Next slide, please. Our budget performance measures, 2 of the 3 look at our spending on contracts to COVID certified firms. And then the second measure is the percentage of contract dollars awarded to COVID firms. So the first measure is looking at dollars actually out the door. We've seen a pretty steady uptick in that from 2021. The second measure is looking at percentage of contract dollars awarded. And the nuance in this is that contract dollars don't necessarily move in the year in which they're awarded. Some contracts, we may not ever actually spend some of those dollars. So tracking both awards and spend is a useful measure about how we're reaching out to businesses in our region. Knowing that the COVID program is having some changes at the state level, we'll look at these measures going forward to make sure that's still the right measure to use. It is a proxy measure. Not all businesses that are small businesses are COVID certified. So we'll continue to look at what's the best thing to measure. Our final measure is looking at the percentage of major funds in compliance with reserve targets. Our goal is 100%. You'll notice in 24 and 25, we're at 100%. I think this metric veers in the territory of being a vanity metric, just to be honest. But I think if you recall back to the presentation of the proposed budget, you'll notice that we raised some warning signs about some of our operating funds potentially not being able to meet those reserve targets. And I think that just reflects, especially in challenging economic climates, how hard it is to meet that target. It takes really focused work, discipline, and decision making to ensure that we don't fall below those reserve targets. So we'll continue using that and hopefully continuing to hit 100% every year.
Right, how many major funds are there?
General fund, solid waste fund, zoo fund, Merc fund. Those are our main operating funds. And then we have different targets for our bond fund, so affordable housing, parks and nature, zoo bond fund. But it's really the operating funds we're focused on for those reserve targets.
There was 5 of them.
I missed parks. Parks operating fund.
6 of them.
Yeah, 6.
Sweet. Is this the last slide for this subject?
Last slide for finance.
Okay, yeah, I have a question.
All right, go ahead.
Thanks, Acting President Wong. This is delightful. Love seeing especially these benchmarks. Just very proud. So shout out to you, to Gabi Schuster. Anytime that I'm in a space with her, other people love her. So shout out to Gabi, just saying. In addition to this, when our economic development work group was together, we hosted this roundtable with some economic development leaders. And one of those folks was Stephen Green, who came from Better Portland. And he was just talking about local purchasing, local procurement. I'm gonna butcher the numbers that he says here, but he's on record for sharing them pretty regularly. It's like whenever you buy a cup of coffee at Starbucks, 30% of the money stays here or something like that, and then everything else goes to corporate shareholders or something like that. When you buy a cup of coffee at a local coffee shop, way more of that money stays here and supports local vitality. One of the things that I have been kind of thinking about and would love to work with you and Marisa, with you, the council, is the right kind of framework and resolution for like a buy local guidance, not like a decree or a mandate or something like that, but something that creates maybe more of a structure. And this is Stephen was like, oh, it'd be great to see Metro have some leadership in this area. So I've been thinking about it for a few weeks. What would you think of something like that? Sorry to put you on the spot. But, and I know that we do kind of really try and foster and support our local procurement, and that's for food and things like that. But yeah, what do you think? And maybe we're already doing a lot of that. Maybe there already are some controls, so that's why I'm asking.
That's a great question, Councilor Gonzalez. On the spot, I would say I'm open to it, but cautious. There are some existing preferences in our administrative rules around Oregon, buying from Oregon locally. There are some thorny constitutional issues if you try to have mandates. So I think we have tried to have more incentive-based solutions to these. I think my suspicion is you see at the staff level a pretty strong drive for local purchasing in current practice. And so we previously through our COVID sheltered marketplace program, that because for the most part it's Oregon-based firms that have COVID certifications, there was a lot of preference for those. We are pivoting that program to a more flexible intermediate procurement program, and sorry to use it, that's a term of art in procurement around Oregon law, but it's really about those kind of mid-size procurements having more flexibility. So we're working with OMA to adjust our administrative rules to allow departments to have flexibility in how they do that. And what we have seen in practice is when departments have that flexibility, they have tended to use it for purchases contracts with local firms. So I think it's something we can definitely talk about, and we have some tools that we can use.
Yeah, great. And I'm just thinking about it as like don't know if it'd be a new performance measure, but it's something I've been thinking a lot about, especially as the economy and, you know, the world and all the changes happening. It's trying to do something meaningful, local, that is guided with the money that we already spend, making sure that, again, it's aligned with our values and all that. So just putting it out there that I'm very interested in working with you on that. Thanks.
Great. Next slide, we can advance to if there aren't any other questions. So we are moving on to information technology and records management. Next slide. So in the current fiscal year, there has been a lot going on in the IT department. So as Holly already mentioned, we had new accessible websites. We also rolled out a number of pretty significant projects. We implemented a new point of sale system for the zoo. So this is the tool by which people buy zoo tickets. We implemented new software in the solid waste system, the software that really runs our scale houses, very important, and then a new public-facing grant application system. The IT department is working really closely with the Revenue and Analytics Division on our AI and data governance initiatives. They're running that work, but IT is a really critical partner. There have been some significant investments in facilities connectivity, like the Wi-Fi in this building, as well as enabling technology for new facilities. And then finally, cybersecurity continues to be a major focus for the IT department. Those threats really only continue. In the current fiscal year, we've done our first ever comprehensive network penetration testing. We're also in the process of implementing the NIST cybersecurity framework, and then have rolled out a number of enhanced security measures for staff, both in terms of things like multi-factor authentication, but also some of the back-end systems that support that work. Next slide, please. Looking forward to next year, the IT budget is focused on strengthening our foundational capabilities. We have, for a number of years, carried a significant number of vacant positions in the IT budget. We have been focused on filling those vacancies. I want to take a moment here and call out our new Chief Information Officer, Jose Rodriguez. He is new, here within the last 6 months, 5 months. We have made tremendous progress in filling vacancies. It's really, pretty inspirational, and I think those hires have been fantastic, and we are seeing the benefits of that. It may not be obvious to you, but you are experiencing the benefits of filling those positions right now. So in terms of organizational capacity, that is really a huge step up. Positions that council has authorized in the past are full, and we are making improvements. The department is really focused on enterprise modernization related to our ERP project. That's a really being the core of our business processes in finance and HR. It's also one of our foundational technology platforms that enables a lot of our work in a variety of areas. And again, like I mentioned, cybersecurity is a huge priority. I think for a number of years, Metro's best defense was our obscurity, relative lack of awareness by the people who do crime in the world. For whatever reason, we have I think a little less obscurity in that area, and we are fairly regularly attacked in sophisticated and unsophisticated ways, and so we need to be well prepared for that. And then one of our kind of newest areas is really focusing on responsible use of AI and data enablement. So we've pivoted some internal resources to focus on that to make sure that we are not falling behind in some of those new areas. The department represents 46 full-time positions. If you look at the pie chart on the right, like most of our central services, most of that is in personnel, but IT does have a relatively large materials and services budget. That's where we're paying for software licensing, access to services, consultants for project delivery. And then in our capital program, that is investments in IT infrastructure and new projects. Next slide, please. Looking at the IT budget, we are showing growth year over year, about an 8% growth from fiscal 25-26 to 26-27. Some of that is in personnel services. Not all of that is new positions. There were some positions from other departments transferred into IT as we were trying to capture some of those economies of scale. And then we also have significant investments in materials and services, and a lot of that is increase in contract costs. Some of the inflation that we saw kind of rip through the economy in 23, 24, is really starting to show up in IT service contracts as well. So we had a relatively significant increase in our IT materials and services budget just to deliver the same level of services that we had in the past. Next slide, please. Budget modifications for next year. There were 2 personnel requests. One was for a new FTE in cybersecurity focused on governance, risk, and compliance. This is, or maybe I should say, when it comes to cybersecurity, we need a multifaceted approach to being secure. Part of that is in what they say are the blinky light things. Machines to do the things that we need the machines to do, but there's also a lot of work around our policies, looking at contracts, ensuring that we have clear structures around governance and decision making. And so we added a position in IT to bring some expertise and capability in the department that way to complement our technical expertise in the department. And then we also added a new supervisor to improve span of control, particularly on our applications team. Span of control in IT has been a challenge. I feel like we've made pretty significant progress on that over the last year. And this also enables our application staff to focus on the ERP project as well, and then maintaining that system going forward. In terms of materials and services, I already mentioned the increase in our operations cost. We also have some additional investment in cybersecurity enhancements, and then some one-time funding related to our digital accessibility work, basically setting aside some funding to remediate documents on our website. Next slide, please. Our performance measures on IT, we have one measure related to the number of days to complete a public records request. Our goal is 15 days. We have been well below that. I think we try to prioritize responding to those as quickly as possible. And then our second measure is help desk client ratings. We tend to have very high ratings, and I think both measures reflect our commitment to public trust and our responsiveness to agency technology needs. I think IT is an area where we would like to have more data about some of the work we do, and we'll be looking at the ERP solution as well as other technology solutions to increase the amount of information we can share about the work that happens in IT. I'm going to pause for a moment to see if there are any questions. Councilor Gonzalez?
Yeah, I have a question. Thank you. So one of the things that has been really relevant to me and to my constituents community I grew up with is around data governance. It's like a really big focus around that with the immigrant justice package and frankly, federal things happening with regards to immigrant communities. What do we share? What do we not? What kind of practices do we have? I don't imagine we don't really have databases of public health services or things like that of that nature, but I guess with the expectation that maybe at some point we may, or maybe with like HMIS, I know that's not our system, but tangentially through SHS programs and things like, I'm just thinking data governance, protecting really vital information of Oregonians and making sure that that like really important trust that we need to protect. Perhaps it's something that we can work on with our new chief information officer, but I'm just curious about that subject. It's been really top of mind.
That's a great question. We do have an ongoing data governance project that is being run by the Revenue and Analytics team. I'm not sure if you were planning on talking about that in the COO's portion of the budget, but that is an interdisciplinary multi-department effort that, led by RAD, includes IT, housing, the people that have data. So data governance is a really significant priority for us right now.
All right. Thank you, Brian.
All right, next slide. We're moving on to the ERP replacement project. So a couple key details. So first of all, the project is projected to go live on July 1st, 2027. So we're doing what's called a big bang implementation. We are implementing our financials and human resources, which includes payroll, at the same time. So running everything concurrently. We started the project effectively in February. So it is going kind of at a breakneck pace. We have 10 FTE dedicated to the project. These are a combination of technical resources and also business resources, so finance and HR specialists. The total project budget is 18.9 million. You can see on this chart that breaks down to about 13.7 on implementation and software, and then 5.2 million in personnel over the project lifespan. Next slide, please. This is a chart, not expecting you to read it. The ERP project, in part because of the implementation methodology we've chosen of going big bang, going live at once, we have a number of parallel work streams. So there's a technology work stream, a finance work stream, HR work stream, a payroll work stream. All these things are happening together in part because our new system is going to be much more integrated than our current system. So it makes sense to do them at the same time. We have a robust governance structure. We have a project team, a project steering committee. I'm the project sponsor. The COO is the project executive sponsor. This is the largest software project that Metro has ever done, and a lot of staff resources are going to be focused on this for the next 15 months. So basically, every key manager in finance and HR is focused on this in addition to their regular job for the next 15 months. This is a huge lift, but it's also one of the most important things we can be working on, because the goal of the system is to move as many of our business processes as possible into the system. I mean, just as an example, if you were to ask me today, Brian, how many active procurements do we have? I would have to go to each of our procurement analysts and say, how many procurements are you working on? And then we could count, and hopefully we'd have that number. Just about any HR process you want to start today, it getting done right is dependent upon the person, the manager, knowing the right email address to send the request into. So many of our processes exist outside of our system. So they, our system for managing procurement is basically Microsoft Outlook. Similar for a lot of our HR requests. A lot of our financial reporting is produced manually in Microsoft Excel. Our existing system is very dated, doesn't include a lot of the key functionality you would expect to find today. So we have workarounds, and we have workarounds around our workarounds. And our goal is to eliminate as many of those as possible, streamline them, and have our staff focused on work that's really adding value, generating meaningful data that we can use for decisions, and trying to be as effective and efficient as possible with our resources.
Brian, does that include like Zoom grants for community-facing transactions?
That is not part of the ERP project, but that is one of the projects that was mentioned earlier on the IT slide. They replaced Zoom grants with a different software product. I don't recall the name, and I think they're piloting right now with planning and parks and nature. But the goal is eventually to roll that out for all of our external facing grants.
And then that will talk to the ERP?
Yeah.
Okay.
So one of the things we did is developed a large system map of basically every technology system we use at Metro and how they relate to each other and relate to our core financial and HR software. And to try to make sure that we understand what those integrations are, the places where they need to communicate and be in sync. Next slide. Sorry, don't think it's the end.
Okay, well, we had a long morning. I'm gonna propose we take a 20-minute lunch break till 1, and I know you're all coming back, so we can continue conversations and questions before we start the next round of presentations. Sound good? Okay, thank you all. We'll be back at 1. I want. Are we recording? Okay. Well, we will reconvene the Metro Council work session and the meeting of the Budget Committee. I think we'll pick up where we left off and bring any questions from the previous presentation. Any questions? I had two quick notes. It's pretty impressive to see 1.6 million website visits.
Yeah,
That doesn't include social media, right?
that's a good question. I can find out. I'm actually not sure. I would assume it doesn't because it's not really one of those key websites, but let me find out. I'll send a chat about it.
Okay, well, it'd be interesting to see what the combined interaction is.
I don't think it does though, because
Because
we've got
websites are,
different metrics on
different.
that. Yeah, yeah. And
But
we've
yeah,
got opportunities to grow that social media
yeah, just because so much.
flow, but I'll just confirm it, but I don't think it does.
Okay. And then Andrew for Cam. I guess my questions would be like, can I just confirm that Cam is separate from like other facilities owning departments like WPES and the zoo and parks? So it's its own separate.
It is.
Okay.
Yeah, it's its own separate department. There's a construction project management office, which is the office that mostly interacts with the other departments. And they have construction project managers that generally work on capital projects, over $100,000. And then the departments pay for that. And, the goal there is to standardize their processes across Metro. I will say, we made an exception for Zubond, because of the projects there, and we're having conversations with WPES about their systems plan as well. But generally speaking, yeah, we created that to bring those folks together. That's one piece of CAM. There are some other divisions as well.
So that's how like the best practices are shared, and is like basically through CAM is supporting all the other departments.
Yeah, so yeah, it's specifically around the construction projects and the capital projects. The goal is to exactly bring those best practices so that you don't have, a project manager in WPES and a project manager over in Parks with no sort of support or peer, support. Now you've got those folks, they all report up. And it's funny, I actually told Nancy she didn't need to be here anymore because I didn't think there were going to be questions. But, Nancy Strenning's the head of that construction project management office, and again, helps coordinate all those capital projects throughout Metro.
Okay, great. And then you had some of the charts around like water usage and power usage. Is that only for CAM or is that?
No, so those are Metro-wide
Okay.
figures, yeah. Yeah, and again, the goal, yes, we've seen some real reductions since 2008. There's also some leveling off, and that just raises questions of how we continue pushing on some of those sustainability goals.
Makes sense. Okay.
And Council President, hot off the press, no, it does not include social media stats.
Yeah,
Maybe
maybe.
share some of those with you if you want. We can compile some.
Yeah, might be interesting just to see kind of a total and
Yeah.
public engagement, because I think people go to the
Absolutely.
website to look for
Yeah,
grants and
absolutely.
things like
Put
that.
together.
Yeah. Cool. Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thank you. I have, at least to start, two very divergent questions. First, Andrew, when we're looking at an early pie chart in the deck, you pointed out that the other funds included the $3 million. That's the loan for Prosper for the food hall pod. So I guess I'm a little confused. Are we double funding that project? Because it was also in the slides for our MERC budget, or were they just referencing something happening that they weren't spending money on?
They were just referencing it. The loan is coming from the general fund.
Okay. So the loan is coming from general fund. That's general fund other. I guess $3 million across the entire agency. That's a percentage. Would there be a way to take it off the top and not charge our departments for that $3 million?
We are not charging departments for that.
Okay.
That is coming from general fund reserves.
General
So
fund reserves.
general fund cash balances.
Okay, great. Thank you. That clarification helps. Are there any other parts of the general fund that we don't do chargebacks to the departments for?
Isn't the Expo Future?
Debt, most everything is charged back out. Our actual like discretionary revenues in the general fund are really just the excise tax revenues we get. So 20-ish million, 21, 22 million. So for things that can't be charged back out, it's generally coming from that excise tax revenue pot.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. My second question, and this may not be the exact place in the budget conversation to have this conversation, but my question is around cash policy. I know during the pandemic, and I don't mean that in the way you're thinking it, I mean from the consumer side, using cash to buy things for Metro. During the pandemic, I know we moved particularly at parks away from taking cash and using credit card or debit card only. Obviously, with the WPES budget, we just okayed a surcharge on credit cards, not debit cards or cash payment. Do we have a policy for the whole agency that allows folks in the region to access our services using cash?
We do not have a policy. My understanding is Oregon law requires organizations to accept cash. So, for the most part, if you can have a machine that doesn't take cash, but if there's another method where people can pay cash, you are complying with that law. So we don't have a central policy, but our expectation is that departments are following the law and allowing people to pay cash.
Thank you.
Just a couple examples of that where we have, like at OCC, electronic payments, we have a reverse ATM where people can put cash in and get a debit card back that then they can use at our organization.
Yeah, I think that I'm very supportive of that Oregon law, and I just think that we should make sure that we're fully compliant and that our vendors on sites are as well. That's it.
Great. Seeing no further questions, thank you very much for the series of presentations.
We're not going anywhere.
Oh, right, you also start here.
Despite how much you might want.
We'll move on to Council and COO budget. Still Andrew and Holly.
Yeah.
I've just got a quick one today. Earlier this week, the USDA arrived at the Oregon Zoo for a surprise inspection. And I just am happy to report that they left today. We are 100% in compliance, which is the exactly, oh, excuse me. Should I start over? Could people hear me?
Just getting ahead.
We're still in budget presentation. Do we need to log out?
You can give this update. I just didn't know if we were moving where we were on the agenda.
No, we're doing presentations still. Okay. You can hold on to the CEO.
Okay, I'll hold on.
Okay.
Thanks.
Sounds like a good one.
Yeah.
It's very good. Leave it on a cliffhanger.
Sneak preview.
Okay, we will move into, and this will be pretty quick and straightforward, but a presentation on the Council, Office of the COO, and GAPD proposed budgets. And again, still Andrew Scott, still Deputy Chief Operating Officer. Still excited to be here with you today. You can go to the next slide, and actually we can skip over it. You've seen this for all the other departments. We don't need to go over it again. So we'll start on the department budget summary. So this is a little bit of a catch-all for the CO's office, Council, and GAPD. As you can see, there are 3 divisions in our department funded through the cost allocation plan. I'll just note that you see these numbers move around a little bit. Significant reductions for next fiscal year include the elimination of 2 vacant FTEs and as well material and services reductions that are actually can be attributed to one-time expenses from the current fiscal year that are not included next year. So that included funding this year for targeted universalism, for Expo Futures support, funding for research on a possible ballot measure. All of those were one-time funded, so they're not funded, next year. And then also we've shifted some funding over to the risk readiness and resilience programs. That's why you see some movement in those numbers. Next slide, please. And then just to talk a little bit about investment progress in 25-26. We made progress in a few different priorities in the current fiscal year. To support the regional funding strategy, GAPD Regional Investment Strategy Manager was hired in February of this year, started working on potential future funding solutions. As we've mentioned a few times throughout the presentation, the Risk Readiness and Resilience Program, or R3, came together in April 2026, so this month, to begin coordinating and implementing recommendations from the Metro-wide risk and safety assessment that we conducted last year. And then I would also note that under R3, the FY 26-27 proposed budget is bringing staff over from emergency management and also from risk and safety under the R3 office. That consolidation of staff and programs under a single manager is going to allow for better coordination across Metro and more effective strategic planning for risk and safety work. And then I would note that the CO Administrative and Operations Support Team has consolidated and really centralized their standardized tasks across all three of these council divisions in DEI, which is helping provide more efficient and effective administration and operations support. And then, as you know, because you've been heavily involved in it, the Target Universalism retreats were held in 2025 and 26 with leadership and stakeholders from across the agency, as well as external committees, to create a shared understanding of TU and the ways in which that framework can be applied to Metro's work across the region. Next slide. And then this is, again, just a pie chart to show a breakdown, and it shows that number of staff in each of the divisions, and then the cost breakdown between personnel and materials and services. And the vast majority of this budget is for personnel and just a relatively small amount for materials and services. And now I'll turn it over to Holly.
Okay, still Holly Calhoun, Metro's other deputy COO. And we can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so as you all know, the council office will be reorganizing in anticipation of elected leadership changes and to respond to agency-wide needs regarding staffing of councilors. To support the reorganization, we have one FTE that will be transferred from the office of the COO into the council office. And we have an additional FTE that will be added to support a 1-to-1 counselor to policy advisor ratio. Next slide, please. Lots of moving pieces here, some of which we alluded to in previous presentations. Apologies. Okay, so we are also making some changes and shifts within the office of the COO to also just improve organizational capacity and alignment. This reorganization results in a net reduction of 2 FTE and approximately $575,000 in savings. There will be an addition of a limited duration position in the COO's office to support the upcoming transition as Metro elects a new council president. Also, 2 FTE are being transferred to the non-department budget R3 that we referenced earlier, in addition to the positions transferring from finance and CAM. Within the COO's office, 2 budget modification packages were approved by the COO for review by council. The first is from the Revenue and Analytics Division and includes a one-time investment of $200,000 to modernize Metro's analytical capabilities. The funds will be used to provide Metro with the technological infrastructure to better model the regional economy and evaluate policy proposals. This allows for more accurate regional forecasting and helps evaluate potential policy impacts for the entire region. Additionally, the goal is to be an analytical hub that can work with both the state and other local governments so that policymakers throughout the region have consistent data by which to evaluate policy proposals. That project is funded through a combination of general fund, $150,000 of it, and supported housing services funds, which is $50,000 of it. Also, as previously discussed during the venues presentation, so Councilor Lewis, this is similar to your question you had a moment ago. The general manager of visitor venues is proposing a $500,000 investment to advance the Expo Future Historical Significance and Memorialization Committee's recommendations. So while it was referenced in the venues budget presentation, the dollars actually sit in the COO's office. This effort is to ensure that the memorialization aspect of Expo's development continues along with the other development work. And this modification is funded through the general funds reserves. Next slide, please. Okay, so for budget performance measures, Every 2 years, all Metro employees are asked to participate in the employee engagement survey, and we track our results over time for comparison. The reporting confidence category reflects employees' confidence in reporting safety issues and conduct issues, including harassment, discrimination, and unethical behavior. This measure assesses whether employees know how to make a report, believe Metro will respond appropriately, and feel that they can report concerns without fear of retaliation. The increase in reporting confidence suggests greater awareness of reporting processes, increased trust that Metro will act appropriately on reports, and increased confidence that employees can report concerns without retaliation. The employee engagement category is a Gallup Q12 category. This score represents a mean across questions that capture research-validated indicators of engagement, including basic workplace needs, teamwork and collaboration, growth and development, and individual contributions and recognition. So I'll actually be coming back next week to do a deeper dive into employee engagement trends. But specific to this performance measure, I do think it's helpful to share with you that according to Gallup's State of the Global Workplace 2026 report, global employee engagement fell for the second consecutive year, the lowest level since 2020, and no region experienced an increase during the past year. Looking at the stable employee engagement score for us, we just want to point out that we had some larger gains earlier and we're leveling out. And so while there's progress, it just suggests an opportunity for us to continue to explore engagement practices and unpack the data to see where we can improve. And I think this definitely aligns to the employer of choice question that you asked earlier, Councilor Gonzalez. And that concludes our slides.
Okay. Comments, questions? Councilor Lewis?
Sure, thank you so much. So I think I got this right, that we're down 4 positions, or are we down 2 positions?
In which office? Because this is a real
This is
fun
the,
level.
we're like putting the
Yes.
ball under the cup and we're
This-
moving.
This is
Yeah.
really fun. It's a net reduction, if I'm going to summarize this accurately, please, my finance friends. Thank you. Net reduction of 2 FTE after all of the shuffling.
Okay, so we're only down 2. So we're doing more with less because we're doing so much more. And I guess that's where I'm just like, some magic has really been made because I'm feeling like our office is gonna have the capacity that we need. Other people are talking about projects that are growing. I'm so supportive of this resilience work, and making sure that we're ready for threats. Do we still have it, like, because I think that's just a lot of like high level director type jobs, and we're losing, if I'm reading between the lines, some of the administrative and functionality redundancies. Are we confident that this new model can work?
I think we are optimistic. And I want to give an example of one of the FTE changes was just efficiency in scope. And so I gave the example of the internal communications team moving into our comms team. That span of control allowed us to eliminate the manager role that was overseeing it. And so the work didn't go away, but we saw an opportunity to reduce a manager position. I'd also just acknowledge we've got a couple bodies of work that have been formed over the past fiscal year and are continuing to grow and excel for us. We've got a strategic projects team and an admin hub that both sit within the COO's office. And we just continue to see their capabilities growing, their ability to really take on incredible work, giving us a lot of confidence that we've got some capacity. I think we have to keep our eye on the ball. I think there was just a huge opportunity with this, the council transition for us to improve the coordination and collaboration between the 2 offices. And more is not always better. So I think this gives us an opportunity to try to really cut through some of the noise and improve the overall model. That's my optimistic outtake. I don't know, Risa, if you want to add.
Yeah, and I'll just add, philosophically, with multiple departments over the last few years, including this year, going through, financial strain, it was a really important value for me and for our executive team to really look at our central services costs and make sure that every dime that we're spending is actually contributing to making Metro better and supporting departments. Really examining, Brian talked about it in FRS as a hiring chill, and that's kind of a similar thing. Like when when positions come open, we really take a pause and look and do we still need this capacity? Do we have another priority now that should be placed higher? You know, where can we move things around? And I'm feeling really good about the structural changes that we made last year on our executive team, the consolidation of certain groups in the COO's office. I'm really excited about the reorg in the council office. So I think it's a really good example of where as a team, we're looking at things with a critical eye and trying to apply our values in multiple ways and, responding, making sure also that we aren't too thin because we are trying to accomplish a lot and we want to do it with excellence. We don't want quality to suffer. So appreciate the question.
My other question is more just, I'm trying to not channel some of the folks who've been in this chamber before who take their red pen out. On page 67, D67 and D68, we have the list of general sponsorships that come out of like COO and management. One of which still lists Railvolution. That organization has shifted their name. They are now Impact Mobility. So we should just update that. It's at least 2 years out of date at this point.
It thrills me when you quote something from the budget.
This is really the other exciting change is less exciting and great, but that is that the Scanner News no longer exists. And we have traditionally had a sponsorship of the MLK Day celebration that they've put on. I would like us to still sponsor something regarding MLK, but we need to find a new partner and maybe remove that specific title for that sponsorship. Really helpful. Thank you. Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Unrelated, but relating back to an earlier conversation, I know Councilor Rosenthal's not here, but we would be happy to talk more to council either, now or in the future about AI. And, it came up in our presentations as well. We have rolled out an official AI policy to our staff in terms of, how to use it in appropriate uses. We continue to look at ways to use it effectively and in ways that are really going to benefit, us as a government and the region, while also being really aware of, some of the ethical issues around it, some of the environmental and sustainability issues around it, some of the bias, that you mentioned as well. So again, I think we're finding ourselves in a place right now where we are certainly not pushing the envelope on it. We also don't want to lag behind. There are concerns for sure, and we hear some of those. We've surveyed our staff and hear those, and there's some also really amazing stories we're hearing from our staff as well that are like, oh my gosh, this thing that used to take me forever is like now taking me like under 5 minutes. Again, I think we're doing a really good job of finding that balance, but we're happy to continue chatting with you all about that.
Okay. All right, well, seeing no further discussion on Council COO, thank you very much.
Can I actually ask a quick question on the AI thing, just building off that? Sorry. You're about to be free. Last week I learned that the city of Portland is maybe partnering with Microsoft just around like a soft co-pilot, the AI tool within Microsoft and Teams and things like that. Can you expand on, well, I guess you kind of talked about that, but I'm just curious as I know that our leadership team is very connected to what other local governments are doing. What are some of the indicators, signals that you're seeing that you're like, okay, I see a proof of concept, might want to replicate that here. I notice a healthy caution with respect to rollout in our organization or, turning on the switch for a tool that's a part of our enterprise Microsoft platform. So I'm kind of curious, what are you looking for to, as important markers to roll something out or to look at that?
Yeah. And am I going to invite Molly up to talk about the work we're doing with the local government coalition?
Yeah.
Come on up, Molly. But while she comes up, we are absolutely looking at what other governments are doing. They're kind of all over the place.
Yeah.
Multnomah County actually was an early adopter. I think it was 2023.
Oh, okay.
They started rolling out AI tools to their employees, doing a lot of training. I haven't actually read about the latest City of Portland things other folks might. We did roll out Copilot. That's our approved AI tool.
Okay.
It's the
Sorry.
only approved AI tool right now. But we also get a lot of people sort of saying, God, can I use Chat or can I use Claude? So IT is where, and Molly are working together to talk about that. But you want to talk about the local government coalition we're a part of out of
Sure.
San Jose? Be interesting.
Happy to introduce myself for the record, right? My name's Molly Vogt. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a data and analytics manager in RAD Group in the COO's office. So yes, the AI field is changing very rapidly. It's very exciting. We've got a lot of great people at Metro working on it. It's been helpful. Just in the last few months, we've gotten a chance to review where we're at, where we have come since October when Copilot was approved and we set out the guidelines. So we're able to use that information to direct where we're going next, which is a great position to be in. We have a lot of folks doing good stuff, as Andrew said. In addition, we're reaching out and we're coordinating with the GovAI Coalition, which is based out of City of San Jose, but it's a national consortium of mostly local, some state, but public agencies who are looking for ways to use and adopt AI in positive ways safely. So they have picked up momentum in the last few months and are generating some resources that have been really useful to us. The original first few rounds weren't necessarily super useful. So they've been gaining momentum. And then also just yesterday, Ian Swanson and I and Jose from IT have been talking about and connecting with the Technology Association of Oregon to potentially put together a regional sort of consortium of public agency folks to talk about what we're doing in this region that might also connect to the national level. But we have a scheduled call scheduled in about 2 weeks to continue working on that front.
That is so cool. I'm so glad I asked.
A huge amount of information, hard to summarize it on the spot, but those are the sources of the information and where we're getting suggestions and where we want to go.
That's awesome. Yeah, I guess like just a quick thing for me on the values and the way that I'm trying to approach, and I would love for us as a council to weigh in on that is, a lot of people feel a lot of worry and anxiety about AI taking our jobs and things like that. And for me, the way I view it in terms of at Metro is like if it helps our employees be more efficient or do some tasks faster, it actually means that they can then work on other very important things that the region needs. And like, I'm not interested in using AI to, cut staff or overhead or to that sense, but how can we continue to be more productive and deliver value for people every day? So that's kind of I think it's an important nuance to distinguish as well. And I'm sure that the council all has a lot of opinions on that. But I appreciate you coming up, Molly, to share. Thanks.
And I'll just chime in.
It's an honor to be here and part of that work, truly. I've been able to do some in-person trainings with folks and hearing all the different perspectives, and it's very rich. It's a good place to be.
We're so lucky to have you and your thoughtful approach to things, because I think one thing to note is that at least so far, and this, there is a rapid pace of change and development with AI, but right now it does still require people. Like, you cannot put inputs into Copilot and get something back that's ready for prime time. You have to read every word. It hallucinates, it makes mistakes. And that's true for not just Copilot, but Claude and, ChatGPT and all of these things. And so I think, the sort of measured approach that we've been taking, I think, is the right one. One thing that I'll mention, I have heard that local governments are turning to AI for somewhat like the federal government for like screening and doing parts of their HR recruitment. And I still feel really strongly that a person needs to be a human in the loop, as Molly taught me, is the phrase. Human in the loop always with AI. I think that with any technology, there's benefits and there's drawbacks. And as a government, I think we have like an ethical responsibility to enter those spaces carefully, but they are really powerful. Some of the tools, especially for editing, for document creation, are incredibly helpful for the tasks that just take a long time to do manually. And I think there's a lot of other things that we can explore, especially the modeling that some folks on your team are doing. kind of maintaining our traditional model, but then also running alongside it, AI models. Like that's, I think, what we should be doing and testing and using really a scientific method to figure out what are the best ways to engage with this technology.
Nice.
I love this question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And one last thing, because I know earlier when we were talking about the IT department, like you listed a few different AI providers. There are a lot more than the ones that you listed as examples. But I think the question of data governance again and just general relationship that I mean companies values the way that they engage with other elements of integrity and ethics, I think is important as well. So I just wanted to share that without calling any one particular company out.
Good feedback, yeah. Okay, thanks again.
Thank you so much.
And on to the last presentation for today, Office of Metro Attorney. Carrie.
Thank you, Acting Council President Huang, councilors. I'm Carrie McLaren, Metro Attorney. I use she, her pronouns. We have a pretty, I will call it, as Brian Kennedy did it with his, a status quo budget. We actually only have about a 1.6% in year over year increases in our office. As shown up on the screen, the Office of Metro Attorney is responsible for all the legal affairs with Metro, meaning that we provide legal advice to the council, to the COO office, to the departments, and to the auditor. We have 11 attorneys in our office, including me, as well as 6 administrative staff, 2 paralegals, 4 legal assistants. Our budget is mostly comprised of personnel. It amounts to about 4.7 million this year. 2% of which is for supplies and services, or M&S. That includes, our bar association dues, our legal research library, et cetera. There is more detail that you can find. Councilor Lewis may have already beat me to it, but on page D64 of the budget is our complete budget, and the detailed budget is found on page E21 of the budget. Just looking back at the, at prior years and comparing our budget to audited budgets from last year. As noted, there are no significant service level changes proposed for this year. Our staff number remains the same. We've actually held our M&S budget flat. I think that will be sufficient for this year, but I anticipate needing to reevaluate it. This is the 3rd year, I believe, in a row that we've held our M&S budget flat as a way of, as Marisa said, trying to reflect some of the overall budget constraints. We've really focused on that as being the one area that's within our control. Other than that, I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Colleagues, any questions? Are you seeing an increased workload in kind of responding to federal actions? And do you have sufficient resources and capacity for that?
Acting Council President Huang, this is always, I think a question that council has every year and appropriate in terms of what's our staffing level vis-a-vis emerging needs. And I think one of the benefits for staffing and funding the Office of Metro Attorney for the agency as a whole is that it allows me and Nathan, our deputy, to adjust who's working on what areas to meet those emerging needs. Our office runs pretty lean, so there are always areas that we could cover, but it does allow us to do that adjustment. I would say the areas of increase certainly are with respect to some of our federal grants. We also are having a fair amount of increase in workload in our supportive housing services, partially attributed to some of the changes in governance that we're seeing. I think partially also just a maturity of the program. IT is another area. I expect to see some uptick with P5 and our venues next year as we go more through the transition. But again, I think the funding model for our office allows us to make some of those internal adjustments to meet the highest priority needs.
Thank you. Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thank you so much. You do good work, so I'm glad you are status quo is good work. Question around materials and services. It looks like you have budgeted $93,000, which is not an increase from this year.
Yep.
I'm guessing though that there are additional funds that you use for services of outside counsel that don't come through your budget, but come through departmental budgets. what's the magnitude of those outside counsel costs relative to the 93,000?
Thank you, Councilor Lewis. I would have to get back to you on the precise number. You are right structurally. So when we need to engage specialty outside counsel, whether it's because of a particular bond issuance or we don't actually, cover our litigation in-house, we hire outside counsel. We don't have a lot of litigation, but for the most part, that's with outside counsel. So that really ebbs, and flows. I'd be happy to get you the numbers. They are in the budget, but I can collect those and circulate the numbers. I would expect $93,000 is just so small. I will go out on the limb here and say I would expect our overall outside counsel services to exceed that amount.
Yeah, I would guess so as well. I'm actually more looking for it in relative terms or proportional terms to your overall, you pack a lot of punch for the size of your budget.
I would agree that that would be a better metric, and I'm happy to circulate back.
Cool. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. Well, thank you, Carrie.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work. Okay, well, the remainder of our time today is reserved for additional discussion. If you have comments or questions about the budget overall or today's presentations, we can discuss them now. Directors, finance managers, and CEO Madrigal and CFO Kennedy are here for questions. Any additional questions? Okay. We had such robust conversation earlier. Seeing no more discussion, I'll adjourn the meeting of the Budget Committee. We will reconvene as the Budget Committee on April 30th, 2026 at 10 a.m. to consider approving the budget. And with that, we'll move on to CEO Communications for the good news.
Sorry about that false start earlier. All I heard was council and COO update and just launched right in. As I was saying, so we had a surprise USDA inspection at the Oregon Zoo this week. They left today. We have 100% compliance, which is what we expected, what we wanted. But I think it's even more significant because in the next few weeks, we'll be receiving our AZA inspectors onto the zoo or in our 5-year reaccreditation process. So congrats to the zoo. And we'll just keep the ball rolling. We'll get that accreditation. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on to Councilor Communications. Councilor Lewis.
Sure. The Housing Department hosted a Fair Housing Symposium yesterday at Oregon Convention Center. I just want to celebrate that we were able to host not only our department, other interested Metro staff, but also folks from PSU, folks from nonprofits, and community members. It was a full room, and just want to celebrate that work. It was a good training.
Great. Anything else? Okay. Seeing no further discussion, the council work session is adjourned. Our next regular